Chapter 401. Luigi flung her face away and snorted. Would this old man be interested in a fake face? Elder. Choan crawled a few steps forward and hugged Luigi's left leg with all her might. Her cries were more mournful than the last, and her eyes were filled with intense hope. I beg Elder to fulfill my wish. I beg Elder to fulfill my wish. Elder. Luigi took out a wooden box from his bosom and threw it at the woman's face. Since you're so unbearably thirsty, this old man will fulfill your wish. When this old man returns to my room in a while, I want to see you stripped and washed clean. In addition, this old man isn't interested in a withered flower. One of Choan's pupils abruptly contracted, and she tightly gripped the wooden box with both hands. Her fingernails had long embedded themselves in the box's crevices, pricking a trace of blood. Junior sister. Peng Zhang was genuinely concerned about his junior sister. He had watched her cultivate so arduously and assiduously, fearlessly going to various adventure holy lands to temper her physique and abilities. But it was precisely this hard-working her that had her left hand cut off by him, despite the pain. Now, in order to beg for a mystic breakthrough pill, she was willing to degrade herself and betray herself, willingly serving that ugly elder who was even older than her grandfather. Peng Zhang burst out with a loud yell, and then he was forcefully held down by the two disciples around him. Junior sister, you can't do this. Junior sister, junior sister. The two disciples firmly covered Peng Zhang's mouth with their hands, preventing him from making any more sounds. Peng Zhang struggled on the ground, and his pair of eyes peeked out from under the gray cloth, bursting with heartache and anger. Choan turned her head and coldly glanced at Peng Zhang with one eye. Then, she tightly gripped the wooden box in her hand and abruptly turned her face away, no longer looking at him. Senior brother, although you are very concerned about me, this is far from enough. What I need is a powerful person to protect me by my side, so that I will never suffer any harm. You, too weak and simply don't deserve to stand by my side. That night, Choan walked step by step into Elder Lu's room. She blew out the lamp and lay on the cold bed, her whole body cold. She stared straight at the black silk canopy above her head, a teardrop falling from the corner of her eye. Her father, her family, and him. Since she couldn't rely on anyone, she could only work hard and fight for herself. She wanted to become stronger. She wanted to become a great level 12 mystic cultivator. She wanted to trample that bitch under her feet in the competition fair and square. She wanted that heartless man to know that even if it was someone he treasured the most in his heart, once they entered the arena, life and death would be up to fate. Not everything could be controlled by him. This time, she wanted him to be powerless to reverse the situation. She just didn't know if she would still be able to see that cold and indifferent him at that time. My Joe's section break. Arbor slept in the middle of the night, only to hear a commotion outside the courtyard, and the lights were lit up little by little. Doya turned over and placed a calf on her lap. She smacked her lips and continued to sleep, showing no signs of waking up. Arbor glanced at her speechlessly. Why were they all sleeping so well? The commotion outside had already turned the sky upside down. She simply put on her clothes and got out of bed. Just as she pulled open the door, she saw two figures running in front of her one after the other. One tried to pull her left hand, while the other tried to pull her right hand. In the end, the youth who pulled her right hand had his hand slapped away by the youth who was pulling her left hand and questioned him in passing, "What are you doing?" Chapter 402. Duan Yu glared at him. "You're the only one allowed to hold hands?" "Of course." Mo Lian grumpily glanced at Duan Yu and directly pulled Arbor to the main courtyard. "I wonder what's going on outside," Mo Lian whispered. "I saw the 3 peak masters leave their courtyards. They can't even sleep peacefully," a senior sister who woke up grumpily said as she rubbed her eyes. Soon, they saw young Shiron walk in with a dark face. She waved her hand at the Holy Water Sect disciples. "Go sleep. Ignore them." All the disciples looked at each other. How could they sleep with such a loud ruckus outside? They heard a male disciple from Daybreak Sect and not the Heavenly Tao Sect say in a low voice, "You people from Coitus Sect say you lost your pet as soon as you arrive, and even insist on searching their courtyards from house to house. What kind of logic is this? How can you be so tyrannical and overbearing? Can't you wait until daybreak? Oh my, this handsome brother. Why are you so fierce? This servant is so scared. Do you want to touch and see that this servant's heart is still thumping nonstop because of you? A gentle and charming voice instantly made all the holy water sect disciples' hair stand on end when they heard it. Fuck, those vixens from Coitus sect came. They were as disgusting as always and had to mumble a few syllables when they spoke. Scram. Someone from the two sects shouted angrily, probably because that female disciple from Coitus sect who threw herself into the man's arms was loathed. Ah, why are you so fierce? If you don't like this servant, then this servant won't lean on you. That woman's voice was mellow and contained a hint of seductiveness as she spoke delicately. Suddenly, she raised her voice slightly, and with a coquettish voice that gave people goosebumps, she shrieked, Aya, it's Big Brother Situ. I didn't even see you. Big Brother Situ, why aren't you calling Mayor here? Duan Yu shuddered all over when he heard this. Why were the women of Coitus faction each more disgusting than the last? He had to hurry and look at his little stoic more often to wash his eyes and make himself feel better. Yang Shirong's expression turned even uglier. She waved her hand at the disciples and said, Don't worry about it. Go back to your rooms. The little stoic silently turned around, wanting to listen to Second Antmaster and return to her room to be a very obedient child. However, the speed at which they stirred up trouble was completely out of your expectations. With a thud, the door to the second southern court, where the Holy Water sect temporarily resided, was kicked to the ground. When Xiaomu turned around, she saw Situ Yi, that handsome youth with sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes, and graceful features, hastily fleeing behind her and Emolien as if he was being chased by a ghost. Aya, Brother Situ, don't run. You're making me so nervous. The little stoic got a clear look at that girl called Mei Er. Her figure was rather impressive under her bright yellow dress. At first glance, she really did have a surging something, and her slender waist couldn't be held in one hand. She was a peerless beauty, but she had a gaudy temperament. Situi hid behind the little stoic and Emolien. He shook his body and fiercely rubbed the fine goosebumps that protruded from his arms. He really couldn't take it anymore. Duan Yu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to take such a sudden turn for the worse. He was just about to find a place to hide, but it was already too late. Mei Er was originally pouncing at Situ Yi, but when she suddenly saw Duan Yu and Emolien after pouncing to the side, she was instantly stunned and screamed with a handkerchief stuffed in her mouth. Chapter 403. Duan Yu jolted in fright and simply subconsciously shrunk behind the little stoic. Emolien, on the other hand, wasn't that cowardly. She instinctively leaned closer to the little stoic and tightly grasped the little girl's small hand. Just as Mei Er was about to pounce forward, the stoic face raised her leg and kicked Mei Er's stomach under everyone's twitching mouths, sending her flying. Well done. Duan Yu and our dear Situ Yi both gave the little stoic a thumbs up in their minds. Heavens, they only felt that if their limbs touched that woman from Coitus faction, they would feel very dirty and uncomfortable. The little stoic blocked evil spirits and blocked wind and moon. The stoic and icy face was simply an invincible basin of cold water that could drench people from head to toe and chill them to the core. Why are you making a fuss in the middle of the night? Can't you let people rest? Wei Nanfeng sleepily walked in, followed by Bailey Shi and Princess Michi Mei Er struggled to crawl up from the ground, her pretty face already flushed red from anger. She turned around and stormed to Arbor, shouting angrily, Who are you? You stink to death. Stay away from me. The little stoic's face was frigid, and she directly reached out to sweep away the fragrant breeze drifting to her nose. Duan Yu and Situ Yi nodded repeatedly. As expected, the little stoic could do what others couldn't. She directly rebuked Chi Mei Er's face with her words. You. Seeing that Chi Mei Er was about to get into trouble, Xixia Valley's Valley Master, who had hurried over, shouted angrily as if putting out a fire. Stop. Miss Chi, didn't this Valley Master already send people to escort you back to your courtyard? Why are you still causing trouble in the second southern court? You came late enough today and shouldn't have disturbed other people's rest. Chi stomped her feet and her small face was covered in tears. My little pet swam away. It has a very strong poison. I was worried about everyone and was afraid that it would hurt others. That's why I ordered a group of senior and junior sisters to search the courtyards. Unexpectedly, I was misunderstood by everyone. Werewolf. The little stoic's hair stood on end when she heard this. She glared at Chi and angrily asked, "What little pet? Did it even need to swim?" "Me. My purple flower little snake." Chi sobbed. "Its venom is very strong. If I'm not careful and get bitten, I won't be able to save that person." Everyone suddenly felt a trace of panic in their hearts. They turned back and forth to check their surroundings. Seeing that there was no one around, they let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a peal of laughter was heard from inside the room, and Murong Sun strutted out in a brocade gown. She held a thin rod in her hand and held a small snake that was slightly charred. She smiled at the person behind Chi and said, "Old witch, long time no see. I didn't expect to be given a ration as soon as I arrived. It wasn't easy to get some food these days." "Thank you, old witch. It's quite crispy and delicious when roasted. Do you want a bite too?" Everyone was dumbfounded. Peak Master Morong had actually roasted and eaten an extremely poisonous snake from the Joyous sect. He was truly a powerful person. An old woman's face with drooping wrinkles slowly appeared in front of everyone. Only then did everyone clearly see that the Joyous sect's faction master, Granny Witch, had also come. They heard that when Granny Witch was young, her figure was bewitching and voluptuous, and her beauty was out of the ordinary. Countless sect disciples prostrated themselves before her, but she used them all as vessels to absorb them one by one. Chapter 404. Later on, Granny Witch seemed to have offended someone, causing her appearance to be completely disfigured, resulting in her current ghastly appearance. However, no one knew what kind of grudge she had with Murong Sun for her to arrange for her disciple to cause such a farce as soon as she arrived at Xixia Valley. Murong Sun ate that purple-flowered snake with relish, but Granny Witch's wrinkled old face had already scrunched up into a ball. It could be seen that the old woman was very angry at this moment. She turned to her disciple, Chi and fiercely shouted, "Don't you find it embarrassing? Come back." Feeling wronged, Chi walked behind Granny Witch with small, quick steps. Her beautiful eyes were filled with shyness and timidity as she swept her gaze over the outstanding youths. Murong Sun, long time no see. When Granny Witch opened her mouth, her voice was quite crisp, like a nightingale leaving the valley. The contrast between her voice and her appearance caused people to shudder instead. "TSK, it has been quite a while." Murong Sun casually tossed the roasted snake. She finished eating to the ground and cheerfully examined Granny Witch's sagging and wrinkled old face. "Old Witch, your face seems to be a bit more wrinkled than it was a few years ago." Everyone could see that Granny Witch's face twitched slightly. Presumably, her mood was not as calm as she appeared on the surface. Perhaps she already wanted to butcher Peak Master Murong and chew on her flesh in her heart. Today, it is this old woman's disciple who has disturbed everyone, Granny Witch said aloofly. This old woman apologizes to everyone here. "Mayor, let's go." Setting aside Chi that oddball, the beautiful woman in plain white clothes with only a small beaded flower in her hair behind the old woman was quite different from the red and green senior sisters around her. Her expression was serene, and her eyes were downcast. Occasionally, she would raise her head and look at everyone with a trace of benevolence. This was truly a little white flower that grew out of the mud without being stained. Everyone silently said this in their minds and looked at Miss Chihua sympathetically. What a pity. A proper girl from a decent family had to follow a group of Coitus Valley witches in and out. Sigh. It truly made one's heart ache. Wait. Murong Sun's voice immediately made Xixia Valley's valley master, Luo Jinyang, jump in fright. He hastily walked up and said with an apologetic smile, "Peak Master Murong, look, it's quite late now. Can we talk about our business tomorrow?" Murong Sun glared at this good-natured valley master and waved her hand. I don't have any other intentions. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, you can leave if you want. However, I don't know which idiot kicked down my front door, so it has to be fixed immediately. Otherwise, no one will be able to sleep. Fix it. All the holy water sect disciples angrily rebuked in unison. Xixia Valley's valley master, this kind old man, hurriedly nodded his head repeatedly. All right, all right, all right. I will immediately send someone to repair this courtyard door. I guarantee that it will be repaired immediately. Murong Sun glanced at this miserable valley master and harumphed. She quietly grumbled, You're such a busybody. She even wanted the old witch to personally fix the door for her. This good-natured valley master was like a firefighter all day long. Wherever there was a fire, he would pour water on it. The valley master thought to himself, I also don't want to. Who knew that you 3 sects and 5 factions would attack me the moment you see me, and you'd go even further each time? Granny, which led the group of Coitus sect disciples away resentfully. She was very displeased that she was unable to take Murong Sun and the others down a notch today. Chapter 405. Before parting, that Miss Chi Mei-er's gaze kept roving over each of the youths. She was reluctant to part with them and found it difficult to tear her gaze away from Emolian. The little stoic suddenly raised her arm. While everyone's mouths twitched, a crow-gold arrow pierced through the air and shot straight for Chi Mei-er's shifty eyes. When Chi Mei-er saw the arrow flying towards her, her soft waist immediately leaned backwards. With a sound, the black gold arrow flew past her face at a high speed. What are you doing? Chi Mei-er had just straightened her body and was about to curse when she heard another terrifying sound coming from the back of her head. Her slender waist was abruptly grabbed by Granny Witch, and her entire body floated a step to the left. She looked on helplessly as the black gold arrow that she had dodged turned around and shot towards her from the back of her head. If it weren't for Master saving her just now, her head would have been pierced by the crow-gold arrow, and her life would have been forfeit. When she thought of this, Chi Mei-er's entire body started trembling, and her venomous eyes looked at the expressionless arbor who was withdrawing his crow-gold arrow. Xixia Valley's valley master was simply speechless. He started to regret it. Why did he agree to the 3 sects and 5 factions back then and allow this lousy competition to be held in his valley? Werwu, he was a good old man who couldn't refuse other people's requests. He was always smiling all day and was persuaded to nod with just a few words. If he could have stuck to his principles back then and not allowed them to hold this event in the valley, he could have avoided so much trouble from quarreling with each other. Werwu, little girl, you're so young, but your heart is so vicious. Granny Witch frowned and sneered. As expected of a disciple taught by Murong Sun, you're so vicious. Thank you for the compliment. Murong Sun tugged at her lips. Damn girl, how could Chi Mei-er tolerate this? She angrily pointed at Arbor and shouted, Why are you so vicious? The little stoic glanced at her and dryly said, Don't stare at me like that. I'll kill people. Everyone. PFT. Wei Nanfeng really couldn't hold back his laughter. Duanyu and Situ Yi, who were standing behind the little stoic, couldn't help but rub their foreheads. Little junior sister, aren't you thinking too much of yourself? She wasn't even looking at you. Chi Mei-er was so angry that her face turned red and green. She glared at her and shouted angrily, Who's looking at you? You. The little stoic said matter-of-factly and stretched out 2 fingers to indicate the direction of their gazes. You've been staring at me since just now. I don't like the look in your eyes. And your eyes are too ugly. You're drawing like a female ghost. It's better if you don't come out to scare people at night. Not to mention Wei Nanfeng, this idiot, who was unable to control himself from laughing. Everyone else present, including Bailey Shi, who was usually expressionless, couldn't help but twitch their eyebrows when they heard this. Emolian, who had been speechless all this while, suddenly lowered her head to look at the little fellow's serious expression. Well, this baby of his was very serious. She really felt that the joyous Union Valley disciple had been looking at her for some reason. When everyone saw their little junior sister's serious stoic face, they couldn't help but roar with laughter. Murong Sun's mouth twitched, and she lightly coughed to remind the holy water sect disciples who wanted to join the crowd in roaring with laughter. Your little junior sister is still young, so don't laugh at her. Arbor was baffled and looked up at Emolian. Chapter 406. Although she lived to the age of 26 in her previous life, she had never experienced any love affairs. She had toiled for half her life, constantly striving and working hard her entire life. At the time, her mother passed away, and her younger brother was only 2 years old. Her father was instigated by her stepmother to bring their family to the Chow family's main residence in Guanlan City. In the beginning, they couldn't enter the Chow family at all and were arranged to live in a small, dilapidated courtyard outside the Chow family's main residence. It wasn't until Arbor was 16 years old that her family suffered the Chow family's disdain. She was called trash until she was 16 years old, and her situation only improved after she awakened her mystic meridians. At the time, everyone thought that since she was already over 15 years old, it was impossible for her to successfully awaken her mystic meridians in this lifetime. However, she held back her energy from beginning to end. After she was 16 years old, she suddenly awakened her mystic meridians on her own one day, causing quite a stir in the Chow family at the time. After all, her situation was considered rather special. After that, even though she successfully awakened her mystic meridians, she still didn't dare to relax. At the time, she thought that since she was stupid, she had to work even harder than others. Thus, she actively participated in all kinds of missions to earn living expenses and continuously train herself in battle. She wanted to improve. She wanted to improve herself like crazy. She had walked out of danger after mission and joined a very ordinary team. Their team wasn't like other teams, which were all made up of mystic cultivators and superhumans. They didn't even care about body cultivator teams. There were even normal people in Arbor's team. The team of nearly 20 people was made up of mystic cultivators, body cultivators, superhumans, and normal people. Every time they went on a mission, everyone would do their best to help each other and try their best to survive in a vile environment. It wasn't until the second year of the mission that she broke down and cried bitterly for the first time when she saw her younger sister Shaolin's tattered corpse in the wilderness that she cried bitterly. Even though she was called trash and good for nothing for so many years and received constant disdain from the main family, she never cried. But at that time, Shaolin's body was truly too tragic. She couldn't hold back her tears, and they rolled down her face. She only remembered kneeling beside Shaolin's tattered corpse and tightly gripping the doll she had given her back then, sobbing uncontrollably. Ever since Shaolin was sent away, she secretly ran to the wealthy Doe family and visited Shaolin a few times. She even gave her some food and a doll. The doll was embroidered for her by her mother when she was young. Later on, she gave it to Shaolin. In her previous life, until Shaolin's death, she didn't dare to tell Shaolin that she was her older sister. When they met again, she saw her sister's pitiful corpse. At that time, she had been piecing Shaolin's broken body together piece by piece as if she had gone crazy. She wanted to complete her body so that she could at least leave in one piece. But she couldn't even do that. Shaolin's body had been left in the forest for too long and had long been gnawed on by wild dogs. She fought madly with the wild dogs and killed them all. Then she held her poor sister and wept uncontrollably. Later on, she realized that just crying was useless. What could crying do? Other than being able to vent his emotions, there was nothing else he could do. 3 years later, his teammates were eliminated one by one in the harsh environment. In the end, only she and Fanxioha were left. Fanxioha. When Arbor recited this name in her heart, her snowy eyes instantly filled with dark clouds. Chapter 407. She thought she could forget, but reality proved that no matter how hard it was to recall the past, this name was still carved like a sharp blade, landing in the depths of her heart. Fanxioha was a very gentle man. He was 8 years older than Arbor, and he always maintained the appearance of a smiling big brother. He was the eldest son of Guanlan City's Fan family. His birth was very noble, but he was easy to get along with. He was cultured and refined, a very good person. In the team, Fanxioha had always been the leader. He had led everyone out of difficult situations many times, making everyone maintain a reverent attitude toward him. In her last life, Arbor was one of the few people that he had sincerely befriended. Friend. If the others could only be considered Arbor's teammates, then this one could definitely be considered a teammate and a good friend. After the two of them got to know each other better, Arbor was quite dependent on this good friend. His trust in her also deepened day by day, to the point that he was willing to give up his life for her. However, it was this kind of man who always had a gentle smile on his lips. This was the friend that she valued the most in her last life. When only the two of them were left, he gave her the most fatal blow. For 2 years, she had been locked up in the dark room that he had carefully prepared for her. She watched as this good friend of hers, whom she had trusted in the past, knocked on her body all day long, studying her inner world. This person had always said one sentence: "It's really strange, Arbor. Why is it that your cultivation is clearly much lower than mine, but your inner world is bigger than mine? Your mystic sense is really strange when compared to other people's. Can you seriously tell me why? I'm a person with an apparition of mystic sense. You can't lie to me. This is all thanks to the apparition of mystic sense. You have secrets on you, Arbor, don't you? Please tell me. I'll be very grateful." So funny. If she was a sensible person, she wouldn't have fallen into such a passive situation. She didn't know anything. Only a silly girl who didn't know anything would be deceived into such a situation. Jojo. She felt her body become light. She was actually picked up by that guy, Emolian, in front of everyone's eyes. She stared at him with her big, dark eyes, staring straight at him. "You're in a daze, my Jojo." Emolian frowned and said softly, "Your expression makes me uncomfortable." It was as if there were countless thoughts hidden within, and it was so heavy that it made one feel uncomfortable. "You must be tired after messing around for most of the night. Ciao, let's go to sleep." Emolian simply picked up the little lady horizontally and turned around to stride towards her room. Everyone was speechless. Behind him, Murong Sun fumed with rage and hollered, "Damn brat, you're really pushing your luck more and more. What did that chicken claw girl mean?" Xiao Mu's puzzled voice rang out. Could it be that she wasn't looking at me? Everyone was speechless. She was just used to walking with her fingers curled up like an orchid, but you called it a chicken claw. How embarrassing. She's looking at you," Emolian said with a smile. "My Jojo is the best." "That's right." Arbor nodded, thinking that the youth was very correct. She knew her taste was right. That gaze was clearly directed at her. That despicable woman actually dared to use such a disgusting gaze to stare at her. The arrow she shot at her just now was still too light. Chapter 408. The next morning, Myriad Faction's faction master, Fei Pingyi, also rushed over with his son, Fei Qing. Xixia Valley's valley master thought that the 3 sects and 5 factions had all arrived, so he gathered everyone to discuss and advance the competition. Everyone actually understood the valley master's feelings very well and sympathized with him. He really wanted to send them, this batch of plague gods, away as soon as possible. Hurry up and finish the competition and scram. Don't cause trouble in Xixia Valley. Who knew? I am Zhou Chao. 2 days ago, I received faction master's notice that our Myriad faction still needs to wait for Eldest Miss to join up. Eldest Miss and her group are estimated to arrive the day after tomorrow. A Myriad faction disciple in his early 20s spoke, somewhat uneasily in front of so many people from the 3 sects and 4 factions. Heh. Granny Witch laughed crisply. Her wrinkled old face was full of disdain. Ninggualai, this coward, procrastinates every time he does something. He wants to be a good person yet doesn't want to offend either side. How can there be such a good thing? Isn't that so? Myriad Faction's faction master, Fei Pingyi, was over 50 years old. He had a long, thin, and narrow horse-like face, and his small eyes were slightly narrowed as he sneered. If we had decided to have Eldest Miss Ning participate in the competition from the start, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. Humph. Granny Witch snorted. Forget it. We don't mind waiting 2 more days. Thank you for your understanding, seniors. The Wanxiang sect disciple wiped his sweat and respectfully bowed to the group. Myriad Factions Faction Master, Ning Guilai's second brother, Ning Guidong, sat in the Myriad Factions group, not daring to let out a fart. How would he dare to oppose Granny Witch and Fei Pengyi? His petty appearance was not as natural and unrestrained as that young disciple, Zhou Chao, and was very disdainful of him. We don't mind. It's only the 7th of August anyway, and there's still a long time before the scheduled 14th of August. It's fine as long as eldest Miss Ning arrives on time. Daybreak Sect's Faction Master, Liang Wanshan, said with a wave of his hand with a bright smile on his square face. This was Daybreak Sect's Faction Master, Liang Wanshan. It was the sect master that her father had always talked about. After her father was expelled from Daybreak Sect, he still held this sect master in high esteem. Looking at him now, Liang Wanshan could be considered a straightforward person. Xiao Zhongbong wasn't Liang Wanshan's disciple back then. His master was an elder in the sect. Arbor had once deliberately found time to ask about his father's past and had a chat with him. He learned that his father's master was called Wei Cheng and was a very cold-hearted person, which was why he mercilessly expelled his father from Daybreak Sect after his father's mystic veins were damaged. As for the person who framed Xiao Zhongbong, Arbor also knew his name. That person was called Mu Liangda, and he entered Daybreak Sect at the same time as her father. They were once best friends and lived in the same room, eating and living together. But it was precisely this fellow disciple and good friend of Xiao Zhongbong's, who he didn't guard against at all, who had actually secretly plotted against him. He put a slow-acting poison in his tea and fed it to Xiao Zhongbong every day and night. Over time, the poison accumulated in his body and completely destroyed his mystic veins. If it weren't for the sapling's leaves helping her father sense mystic energy anew and reconstruct his mystic veins, Xiao Zhongbong would have completely become a cripple in this lifetime and would never be able to recover his identity as a mystic cultivator. Xisha Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang's eyelids suddenly twitched when he saw Miss Qiao staring fixedly at Daybreak Sect's Faction Master Liang Wanshan. Chapter 409. Cough. Valley Master Luo hastily said, "Since no one has any objections, then let's wait for eldest Miss Ning for another 2 days. Once eldest Miss Ning arrives, the competition can be held in advance." The Omni-Faction disciple, Zhou Chao, didn't respond, but Liang Wanshan continued, "Then let's wait until eldest Miss Ning arrives. At that time, eldest Miss Ning will be fatigued from the long journey, so she will certainly need to rest for 1 or 2 days. Valley Master, the competition isn't urgent." His words were indeed reasonable. The Omni-Faction disciple, Zhou Chao, cupped his hands at Liang Wanshan and revealed an expression of endless gratitude. The Valley Master's eagerness to finish the competition as quickly as possible and immediately chase them out was evident. As long as one wasn't blind, they would be able to sense it. Xisha Valley's Valley Master, Luo Jinyang, laughed awkwardly and sighed unhappily in his heart. This group of plagues still had to stay here for a few more days. Hopefully, they wouldn't cause any more trouble for him during these few days. He kept feeling that he had rapidly aged in merely a few days, and many strands of white hair had sprouted. It was all because of the 3 sects and 5 factions' worries. Sect Master Liang, does your sect have a disciple named Mu Liangda? Arbor suddenly asked, her eyes still staring unblinkingly at Sect Master Liang Wanshan. Liang Wanshan had long discovered that this holy water sect girl had been staring at him. Yesterday, when he and the Heavenly Dao sect master, Situ Min, paid a visit to the 3 peak masters, he had noticed that this chilly little girl had been staring at him without blinking. Sect Master Liang was adept at handling matters and had already secretly ordered people to investigate. He found out that this little girl was the Holy Water Sect's youngest disciple and also Peak Master Morong's most beloved last disciple. Normally, as long as no one provoked the little girl, she would speak very politely. Liang Wanshan smiled at Arbor and said with a nod, "There is indeed a person named Mu Liangda. Is Miss acquainted with him? Liangda, please stand up." All the disciples were seated behind their own sect or clan master. The 3 sects and 5 factions basically had around 30 disciples in each group. Fortunately, Shisha Cloud Valley's conference hall was quite large and was packed to the brim. When Mu Liangda of the Daybreak sect heard the sect master's call, he respectfully stood up. Wearing the Daybreak sect's unique white robe, he was over 30 years old, but his face was fair and beardless. His appearance was handsome, and his posture was confident and at ease. The moment he stood up, he attracted the coquettish glances of the Coitus sect's female disciples. Mu Liangda smiled at the young lady. "May I know who you are? Liangda doesn't seem to have seen you before." The little girl nodded and said seriously, "It's good that you don't know me. In the first round of the competition, I challenge you. You just have to remember that I am someone who is about to beat you to death." Everyone was speechless. The corner of Shisha Valley's Valley Master's mouth kept twitching. He had just been silently praying in his heart that the 3 sects and 5 factions should not cause any trouble for the next 2 days, and now, trouble had come again. Mu Liangda did not get angry and actually smiled very confidently. He said humbly and courteously, "Since Miss wants to challenge me, then I can only accompany you. However, whether the first round of the competition is between you and me is still subject to discussion." When Arbor stood up, everyone's mouths involuntarily twitched. Arbor turned his small face and looked at Shisha Cloud Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang, who had turned his head away. "Good person, Valley Master. I want to challenge Mu Liangda in the first round. Is that all right?" Chapter 410. The good person Valley Master really wanted to cry. Call this little girl savage, but look at her soft and squishy little thing. She was more fair and adorable than anyone else. Call her indecent. She was more serious and expressionless than anyone else. Every sentence she said sounded quite serious when separated, but it was extremely hilarious when strung together. She even said, "I'm someone who's about to beat you to death." These words were truly hilarious. We still have to draw lots according to the order of the competition. This way, it's fairer for everyone. Shisha Valley's Valley Master gave the excuse he had thought of long ago. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the little girl's slender brows furrow into a knot. Shisha Valley's Valley Master was distressed, so he quickly smiled kindly at the little girl. "However, little girl, don't be impatient. Even if you didn't draw Mu Liangda in the first round, it doesn't mean you won't draw him every time." Mu Liangda, what's going on? He felt like Shisha Valley's Valley Master spoke as if he was a prize. Draw or not draw. If you draw, you'll get the grand prize. If you don't be discouraged and continue to draw. Then will the results of the draw be announced? Will the name of the person who draws the number plate for Mu Liangda's match be announced? The little girl seemed to be especially reasonable today, as she continued to interrogate good-naturedly. The Valley Master instantly felt that the little girl was giving him face, so he nodded cheerfully. That's right. All the names of the competitors will be announced one day in advance. I will have the Valley disciples prepare them then." Okay. Our dear Xiao Mu didn't say anything else and sat down obediently. Only the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions kept feeling some kind of energy faintly lingering above their heads. Something was wrong. There was something wrong with the little girl's style today. Shouldn't she immediately berate Mu Liangda? Why did they feel so strange when she suddenly asked the Valley Master if they would announce some sort of name list? However, Mu Liangda was oblivious to the impending calamity and smiled coolly. He lifted his white robe and sat down with a ramrod-straight posture. When he sensed a gaze, he turned his head and met Duan Yu's eyes. Mu Liangda naturally did not dare to slight this sect master's eldest personal disciple. He nodded at Duan Yu with a smile, but he was very puzzled as to why the other party was shooting him a meaningful gaze. When the Valley Master saw that everyone had reached a preliminary agreement, his tense mood finally eased a little. He laughed and said to everyone, "Since we still have to wait for 2 more days, then everyone can do as you please during these 2 days. If you want to leave the valley for a walk, that's fine. If you want to cultivate in seclusion, you'll have to hurry." The meaning behind the Valley Master's words was, whether you scram or go into seclusion, in short, please don't cause trouble in Shisha Valley. Everyone pretended that they didn't understand what the Valley Master meant. They all nodded with a smile and followed the people from their respective sects back to their residences. For the next 2 days, the Valley Master felt very comforted. The people of the 3 sects and 5 factions all closed their doors and rested in their own courtyards. Every time Shisha Valley's disciples went to deliver food, they would always bring back news of peace and tranquility to the Valley Master, causing the Valley Master's nerves, which had been stretched taut for 2 days, to finally relax slightly. That night, Ning Bihuan finally arrived at Shisha Valley with a team of more than 20 people led by her. In view of everyone's excellent performance these days, the Valley Master planned to treat everyone to a small banquet out of his own pocket as a welcome dinner for everyone. When everyone arrived, Ning Bihuan's group was already there. Chapter 411. Eldest Miss Ning led her people and boldly sat at the main table in the center. The remaining Omni-faction disciples surrounded Ning Bihuan's table and also took up 2 or 3 tables. The small feast was set up next to the flowery pavilion in the valley. There were a total of 26 tables, and the dishes could be considered very sumptuous. Shisha Valley had always lived in seclusion, so there was quite a bit of grain stored in the valley. It was rare for them to be able to have a good meal, so the Holy Water Sect disciples hurried over early, planning to occupy a good seat. In the end, they saw Ning Bihuan's corpse-like face staring gloomily at them. To be more precise, Ning Bihuan's stiff and cold corpse-like face was facing Emolian. Her serene eyes unwaveringly stared at the youth in front of her. She almost instantly recognized this youth as the person who had appeared in her younger sister's remnant life lamp. Her deep gaze stared straight at the youth, but she didn't receive the slightest response. The youth's gentle gaze landed on the little girl beside him the entire time, so how could he notice Ning Bihuan's gaze? The little girl had changed into a pink robe today. The little fellow, who always wore plain clothes, appeared even more pinkish and tender after changing into a small robe, as if she was carved from jade. Emolian didn't notice Ning Bihuan's overbearing gaze, but the little fellow caught it at once. At this time, Ning Bihuan's gaze had already shifted to the little girl. When Arbor clearly saw Ning Bihuan's appearance, she couldn't help but be taken aback. This girl seemed a bit familiar. Her face was oval, and her willowy eyebrows were slightly curved to her temples. She wore a cyan robe, and her entire person appeared to be in high spirits. Ning Bihuan saw her somewhat bewildered appearance and knew that she had already forgotten about her idiotic younger sister, Ning Bifan. It wasn't that she cared much about that idiot. She just didn't like people directly climbing over their Omni-faction's head to behave atrociously. She, the one surnamed Ning, wasn't that easy to talk to. Ning Bihuan curled her lips and looked straight at the little girl. Do you feel that my face is a bit familiar? Half a month ago, you killed someone in the adventurer base near the Great Swamp. She had the same face as me. That girl was my twin sister, Ning Bifan. Realization dawned on Arbor's face. He nodded at Ning Bihuan and said, I remember now. It's that woman who put her face in front of me and kept telling me to hit her. After I hit her, she asked me why I dared to hit her. She's such a strange person. The senior sisters of the Holy Water Sect didn't understand the reason, but they could understand how hilarious it was when they heard the little fellow's explanation. Ning Bihuan naturally didn't know that such a thing had happened at the adventurer's base, but she had always understood the extent of her brainless younger sister's stupidity. She didn't doubt the young lady's words. Are you here to avenge your sister? Arbor looked at her and asked. Ning Bihuan sneered. Do I look like such a bored person? If an idiot dies, then so be it. I'm here to challenge him. Ning Bihuan's finger pointed straight at the youth Emolian. A bellicose flame danced in her eyes. You're very strong. Youth, I want to challenge you. When the people from the Daybreak sect, the Heavenly Tao sect, and the other 4 factions came over, they just happened to see Ning Bihuan pointing at Emolian and issuing a challenge. Everyone couldn't help but fall silent. The competition hadn't started yet, but there were already people issuing challenges one after another. Young Master Emo isn't a member of our Holy Water sect. He only came to watch the competition. Chapter 412. Su Shanshan coldly rejected Ning Bihuan's challenge. Ning Bihuan, your opponent is us. Don't get the wrong opponent. Ning Bihuan pursed her lips noncommittally and stood up to look straight at Arbor. All right then. After the competition ends, I hope to battle with young Master Imo and see who's better. Arbor was baffled. Miss Ning, why are you staring at me? Why are you staring at me when you want to challenge young Master Imo? Am I not young Master Imo? Ning Bihuan was also a bit gloomy. She originally didn't come to seek justice for her idiotic younger sister. From beginning to end, she was willing to participate in this competition with only one goal: to not let anyone bully her Omni faction and tell anyone from the 3 sects and 5 factions that her Omni faction couldn't be bullied. In addition, she wanted to challenge the white-clothed young master. She saw that powerful youth in the miniature of her younger sister's life lantern, and this youth practically ignited all the fighting blood in her body at that time. She wanted to fight. She was a person who lived for the sake of fighting. Hello, stoic-faced miss. Do you think I want to look at you while speaking? In reality, that young Master Imo of yours didn't even spare a glance at other people out of the corner of his eye from beginning to end. She only spoke to Arbor because she had no other choice. Emolian, someone wants to challenge you. The little girl tugged at his sleeve. I'm not free. Emolian held the little girl's small hand and followed the Holy Water Sect group to take their seats. You'll definitely accept my challenge. Ning Bihuan stood up and stared darkly at Emolian. She threw down this sentence with a stern face, but the latter completely threw it to the back of her mind. Shisha Valley's Valley Master hurried over after hearing the news. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw that the 3 sects and 5 factions were all present and were chatting softly, clinking cups, drinking wine, and eating. He had just received news that eldest Miss Ning had quarreled with the Holy Water Sect disciples, so he thought that this group of young ladies would turn the entire banquet upside down again. Unexpectedly, the scene he saw was so harmonious. It truly surprised and delighted the Valley Master, and he almost wanted to shed a tear for himself. It truly wasn't easy to be a competent peacemaker. After 3 rounds of wine, everyone was 80% full. On a whim, Shisha Valley's Valley Master ordered someone to bring over the lot pot and said to everyone with a chuckle, seeing that everyone from the 3 sects and 5 factions has gathered, I might as well bring forward the competition. If eldest Miss Ning doesn't have any objections, how about we set the competition for the day after tomorrow? Ning Bihuan waved her hand, a stiff smile hanging on her stiff little face. We martial artists aren't that particular. The day after tomorrow is the day after tomorrow. It's up to you. Miss Ning is truly straightforward. Shisha Valley's Valley Master was overjoyed. Dear ancestors, hurry up and finish the competition and scram. After the Valley Master signaled with his eyes, Shisha Valley's disciples hastily carried the 8 bamboo tubes to the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions. There are 120 pairs of numbers here. If you draw the corresponding number, go to our disciples and register. The Valley Master explained with a smile, then let all the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions draw lots. In any case, it was all up to luck, so no one paid much attention to it. One by one, they reached into the lot pot and took out a lot. 2 Shisha Valley disciples sat on the side to register the lot and name. Our dear Xiaomu abruptly stood up and pattered over to Daybreak Sect's table. Duanyu immediately turned around in excitement, and his peach blossom eyes blinked as he asked, Jojo, you were looking for me? Chapter 413. I'm not looking for you. Arbor shook her head and looked at Muliangda, who was sitting at the same table as Duanyu. Muliangda stood up and smiled at the little girl in a self-righteous manner. He asked amiably, Little miss, you're looking for me again? Duanyu pursed his lips at him. Who's looking for you? The little girl is looking for you to beat you to death. She's looking for you. Arbor nodded. What's your number? This one is number 82. Muliangda looked at the number in his hand and smiled good-naturedly at Arbor. He wasn't afraid of this little girl. Even if the little fellow said she wanted to beat him to death on the day of the competition, he would only treat it as a joke. What a joke. This little girl even shamelessly boasted that she wanted to beat him to death in the first round of the competition. Ha ha ha. It was hilarious just thinking about it. She really was a little girl spoiled rotten by her elders. It wasn't a good thing to go out and gain experience with such blind confidence. She would be killed by her own arrogance and stupidity. That's right, he just didn't believe that he, Mu Yangda, could be defeated by a little girl with his skills. Haha, don't joke around. He wasn't a simple mystic cultivator. Everyone in the sect knew of his abilities. Even his master, Wei Cheng, had to take his identity into consideration and flatter him a lot of times. Jojo. Duan Yu pulled her aside and whispered to her, "This Mu Liangda is famous in the sect for being a smiling tiger. I heard that he has some connections with Guanlan City's talisman patrician family. He seems to be from a side branch of that family. He has many powerful talismans in his possession." As he spoke, he stuffed a small box of concealed weapons into her hand. "If you really fight him, don't let him throw talismans. Feed him a bunch of shooting stars first and beat him to death." Talisman practitioner? The little fellow was startled, but she took the box that Duan Yu stuffed into her hand and nodded repeatedly. Number 82, was it? She first ran back to her own table and browsed through all the senior sister's hands. Imichim, there was no number 82. Then she ran to Situ Yi's table and had him check if anyone in the Heavenly Tao sect had that damn number 82. "Jojo, do you really want this number 82? Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but tease. "Then what if the person holding number 82 isn't willing to exchange with you? For example, if you picked a lot, your opponent would be stronger. Naturally, others wouldn't be willing to trade with you." Xiaomu cast him a glance, and her small brows creased deeply again. "Troublesome. There's no 82. Situ, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he returned after asking around. Arbor was a little angry. He turned around and glanced at Bailey Shi, who was sitting in the Purple Firmament faction seat. He frowned and thought for a while, then ran over on his own. "Do you have 82? The little fellow poked Bailey Shi's arm and stared at him. Bailey Shi glanced at her and did not refuse. However, when he went to ask his fellow disciples, there was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. His hard work paid off, and he finally got the answer from Bailey Shi. The holder of lot number 82 was a 15 or 16-year-old young girl from the Violet Firmament Guild. Her face was round like a delicate red apple. Miss Chiao looked down at her lot number. "I'm number 53. Are you willing to exchange with me?" "Sure. It's not registered anyway." Yuan Jixin, the girl who picked up lot number 82, very straightforwardly handed over the lot number in her hand. In fact, the Valley Master had long seen everything. Cough, cough. This was clearly blatant cheating. Chapter 414. Why didn't anyone stop them? And so many shameless people even popped out to support them. Valley Master expressed that he was very stifled. Seeing them act so openly, he could only choose to be blind. "Thank you." The little girl thanked him politely, took the number from the other party, and handed her number 53 to the other party. Then she added, "If you can't beat that number 53, I'll help you beat him back later. I'll help you vent your anger." Yuan Jixin giggled. Number 53 took that number and glanced at it, silently speechless. Bailey Shi's mouth twitched helplessly. "Miss Chiao, number 53 is standing next to you." "HM? What a coincidence." The little girl turned her head and saw the face of an ordinary passerby. Number 53 was also a Purple Firmament faction disciple, but he was considered one of the weaker ones among the many senior brothers and sisters. So when the little girl's gaze shot over, number 53 hurriedly raised his hands and said in exasperation, "Don't worry, little girl. I definitely can't beat senior sister Yuan Jixin. Once senior sister makes a move, it'll only be a matter of 2 or 3 moves, and I'll immediately roll off the stage." This jokered, everyone laughed and scolded. Yet the little fellow heaved a sigh of relief and returned to her table after bidding farewell to Bailey Shi and the others. Seeing her return, Emolian couldn't help but chuckle softly. The little fellow finally got her wish after busying herself for a round. But why was it so interesting? Emolian propped up his chin with one hand and turned his head to look at her with an uncontrollable smile. "If that girl with number 82 isn't willing to exchange with you, what do you plan to do?" Our dear Xiao Mu was expressionless, but her 2 small brows furrowed again. "That Miss Yuan is pretty good. She's not a man, so I can only drop it." Everyone was a mystic cultivator, and Imo and Arbor's conversation wasn't low. The youths at the nearby tables all heard it, and they couldn't help but widen their eyes when they heard this. What did she mean? So what if he was a man? Men were discriminated against, right? Wei Nanfeng chuckled as he squeezed over with a wine jug in his hand. If number 82 is a man and he's unwilling to exchange with you, from your tone, you plan to beat him up overnight and directly snatch away the number? Our dear Xiaomu nodded honestly. It couldn't be helped. She planned to do that from the start. However, number 82 was a girl, so it was better to be more refined. PFT, Wei Nanfeng winked at Imolian and said meaningfully, I feel that this little lady is even more mischievous than your Yuer. She needs to be taught. When Murong Sun heard this, she immediately shielded her. What? You have an opinion? I teach my disciple too well. Wei Nanfeng hurriedly flattered. Indeed, indeed. Peak Master Murong. This disciple has misspoken. Humph. Murong Sun rolled her eyes at him and reached out to pick up food for her youngest disciple. My dear disciple, you were busy the entire night and didn't eat much. Here, eat more. Your body is still growing. Peak, tt eat Murong to chow eat, tease to eat teat, ti chow, tt after a short while, the small plates were piled up into a small hill. Come, Jojo, eat more. Emolian placed the chopsticks in her hand and looked at her with a grin. You'll only have the strength to beat people when you're full. Everyone. Young Master Mo's style was off. If Huifeng was here, he would definitely chuckle and say, Sorry, His Highness has always treated the little girl like this. Chapter 415. 2 days later. Everyone had recuperated until they were abnormally full of energy. One team after another set out to the northern part of Xixia Valley, which was an extremely spacious field. The forest here wasn't as lush, so the Valley Master had long made preparations. He ordered people to set up a large stage and also set up many seats for everyone. The 10 or so silk seats in the front row were naturally prepared for the sect masters and elders of the various sections. The disciples each sat on a row of small square stools in the back row. Some extremely bored people even prepared their own tea and snacks, intending to eat while watching the show. The Valley Master set up a gong on the side in imitation. A male disciple of Xixia Valley tied a red ribbon around his head and held a gong hammer with a fluttering red ribbon in his hand. The Valley Master had just sat down at the head seat in the center and exchanged pleasantries with the Peak Masters and Sect Masters beside him with a smile on his face. Just as he was about to announce the rules and call out the numbers, he heard the gong ring with a clang. Everyone. The freaking Valley Master should be feeling very depressed right now. He hadn't even started calling out the numbers, yet that idiot disciple had already started ringing the gong. Xixia Valley's Valley Master turned his head to glare at that idiot disciple from afar. That disciple stood there with an innocent expression and smiled foolishly at him while holding the gong hammer. I'll first announce the rules. We'll proceed according to the order of the lots. As long as one side concedes defeat, the competition will end. If you can still fight without admitting defeat, then continue fighting. We're all members of the 3 sects and 5 factions, so it's best if we don't overdo it. Xixia Valley's Valley Master laughed. All right, now, let's invite number 1 onto the stage. The competition begins. Everyone looked towards that young disciple holding the gong hammer. That idiot didn't hit the gong when it was supposed to and kept staring at the Valley Master as if waiting for his order. The Valley Master waited for a long time but didn't hear the gong ring. He turned his head to glare at that disciple and roared angrily, Why don't you hit it? Everyone roared with laughter. With a clang from the gong, the 2 disciples number 1 flew onto the stage with vigorous postures and started exchanging blows without another word. When mystic cultivators battled, the strength of mystic energy was to a large extent. At this time, mystic cultivators had yet to realize the importance of mystic consciousness, so they could only see mystic energy flying back and forth and smashing directly at the other party. Arbor took a cursory glance at the mystic skills used by these 2 mystic cultivators and could roughly determine that they were mid-level mystic skills. Most of the mystic skills that were circulating in the market were elementary mystic skills. For people like them who had joined a sect, being able to cultivate intermediate mystic skills was already considered pretty good. Only Master's personal disciples, those kind of disciples with decent talent, would be able to practice the sect's high-level profound skills, and even be able to go to the treasure pavilion to browse the higher-level ones. In a battle of profound skills, when a high-grade profound skill went up against a mid-grade profound skill, needless to say, the high-grade profound skill would definitely have the upper hand. However, the two people in front of him were displaying mid-grade profound skills, so it would depend on their comprehension of the profound skills. After a smart person finished reading the profound skill, not only would he be able to completely comprehend it, he would even be able to comprehend some more profound skills based on this foundation. However, it was clear that these two people weren't particularly intelligent, so their mystic skills were displayed in accordance with the norm. One trained his hands, while the other cultivated a mystic skill that trained his head. Therefore, when the other party clawed at him, that person always liked to use his head to block it. This made our dear Xiaomu laugh in her heart, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Number 2. Holy Water Sect's disciple Chun Hanzi versus Ghost Faction's disciple Peng Zhang. The Valley Master picked up the number plate beside him and announced. Chapter 416. The Xixia Valley disciple forcefully struck the gong. Clang. After the gong sounded, Chen Hanzi and the Ghost Faction disciple, Peng Zhang, flew onto the stage and cupped their fists in greeting. A venomous glint flashed through the Ghost Faction disciple's eyes, and his gaze subconsciously landed on his junior sister. Choan's senior brother will definitely avenge you today, junior sister. Everyone from the Holy Water Sect deserves to die. If it weren't for you guys, how could his junior sister, Choan, be such a strong-willed girl, submit herself to that ugly and sickly old man? Peng Zhang pulled out an item as thin as an iron wire. This was his level 7 mystic weapon, Mystic Spider Silk. It was incomparably sharp and also extremely good at concealment. Usually, only when the Mystic Spider Silk was right in front of the enemy's eyes would they be startled to realize that it had slit their throats. Peng Zhang took out his mystic weapon right off the bat. He had made up his mind to make Chen Hanzi bleed on the spot within 3 moves. Chen Hanzi sneered and suddenly summoned her exquisite awl from her conscious with a shake of her hand. The exquisite awl was triangular, so the sharpness of its tip was definitely stronger than the mystic spider silk. Moreover, this awl also had a wondrous use, which was that the awl head could suddenly lengthen. Only when the enemy died would they realize this point. This level 9 mystic weapon was a treasure she had dug out from Maple Pavilion. It was quite handy, and she normally wouldn't take it out to use unless it was an important situation. But now, since the other party had also taken out a mystic weapon, could it be that she had to passively take a beating? Humph. None of the Holy Water Sect's members were afraid of trouble. Peng Zhang channeled mystic energy into his hands and covered the mystic spider silk. He took a step forward and directly swiped it at Chun Hanzi's neck. When this move was used, Lu Yun's eyes turned completely gloomy. This Ghost Faction disciple clearly wanted to take her disciple's life from the start. Doya nervously clenched her hands. Although she didn't make a sound, her large, watery eyes clearly revealed her anxiety. Chun Hanzi fell backward on her back and suddenly threw out the exquisite awl in her hand. Upon closer inspection, the awl's tip collided with the mystic spider silk, and it actually created a tiny spark. Chun Hanzi's body turned upside down and quickly kicked out twice. Borrowing the force of the kick, she flipped over and landed steadily on the ground with a backflip. The exquisite awl once again returned to her hand, and a ray of profound energy light burst out from the sharp awl, sweeping out an arc-shaped energy ripple as it charged straight at Peng Zhang. Peng Zhang repeatedly took a few steps back, and he was barely able to stand firm when he felt a sweetness in his throat, causing him to fiercely swallow down a strand of surging blood. In the depths of his eyes, which were covered by the gray cloth, there was a hint of killing intent. "Come out, thousand-faced venomous spider." A trace of viciousness flashed across Peng Zhang's eyes. "Holy Water Sect disciple, you forced me. If it weren't for the fact that you were so insensible and refused to be executed obediently, why would I summon the thousand-faced venomous spider?" This time, You're the one who brought this upon yourself, and you're going to die a miserable death. Don't blame others. Peng Zhang grinned and pointed at Chunhanzi. Poison spider, this is your lunch. Go. Hiss. The thousand-faced venomous spider waved its 8 long legs and crawled towards Chunhanzi at an extremely fast speed. Chunhanzi's expression froze, and she hastily released her level 9 mystic beast, the Silver Wolf. When the Silver Wolf charged towards the thousand-faced venomous spider, Chunhanzi also swiftly dashed towards Peng Zhang. Substantial killing intent had already condensed in her eyes. Peng Zhang sneered and flung out his mystic spider silk. The instant he attracted Chunhanzi's attention, he swiftly took out something from his sleeve and lightly pinched it. Chapter 417. Arbor, who was sitting in his seat, abruptly stood up and stared at Peng Zhang with his sharp, cold eyes. Hanzi, quickly admit defeat. Come down. Lu Yun also stood up and looked at her disciple with eyes full of anxiety. However, in the blink of an eye, the 8-legged venomous spider suddenly spat out a mouthful of venom with a hiss, and its sharp little venomous fangs abruptly bit at the Silver Wolf's paw. The Silver Wolf was very intelligent and naturally knew that this thousand-faced venomous spider's teeth were very formidable. However, just as it wanted to escape, it discovered that its paw was hooked by something. When it looked down, it discovered that it was a ball of spider web that had unwittingly entangled its paw. The thousand-faced venomous spider bit down on the Silver Wolf's white fur. The Silver Wolf immediately fell to the ground and rolled around in pain. On the other side, Chunhanzi discovered that an exotic fragrance had suddenly burrowed into her nose. Just as she cursed inwardly, she suddenly heard the Silver Wolf's wretched howl. She panicked, and when she was distracted again, Peng Zhang's mystic spider web was already slicing towards her neck. "Punk, you dare!" Lu Yun shouted, her eyes glaring so red that they were about to burst. When Xixia Valley's Valley Master saw that something was amiss, he immediately jumped up and shouted to stop. "Ghost Faction Disciple, you've won. Immediately release the Holy Water Sect's miss and quickly leave the stage. Split up. Split up." However, Xixia Valley's Valley Master's shout was useless. He couldn't stop Peng Zhang's deranged actions. Chunhanzi tilted her body at the moment of extreme danger, and her neck arched backwards to avoid that mystic spider web. Unfortunately, her head was dizzy and swollen, and her mobility was greatly affected. Her limbs felt like they were being restrained by something, so they were very slow and exhausted from head to toe. Although she managed to avoid Peng Zhang's fatal strike towards her neck after her movement slowed down, she couldn't avoid her shoulder anymore. However, that mystic spider web pierced into her shoulder. At this time, Chunhanzi already couldn't feel the pain in her shoulder. She only felt that her body was very, very heavy, and her head was so heavy that she couldn't control it. Her body suddenly leaned back and fell heavily onto the stage with a bang. Senior Sister Chun, Junior Sister Hanzi, the senior and junior sisters of the Holy Water Sect all stood up and shouted angrily. Xixia Valley's Valley Master decisively flew onto the stage and grabbed Peng Zhang's moving wrist. He coldly glanced at him before saying, "Ghost Faction Disciple Peng Zhang wins." Peng Zhang was unwilling to accept this. He forcefully shook off the Valley Master's hand and jumped down from the arena. When he passed by Choan, Peng Zhang's footsteps paused, and he whispered to Choan, "Junior sister, how did I do?" Choan revealed a pair of stern eyes from under the gray cloth scarf. She nodded with a smile and said, "Senior brother, you did well this time." On the other side, several senior sisters from the Holy Water Sect had already run up the stage and carried Chunhanzi and the Silver Wolf down. Black liquid flowed out of their wounds, especially the Silver Wolf, which had been severely injured by the thousand-faced venomous spider. Its fur was constantly festering and falling to the ground in handfuls. Both of them were on the verge of death. "Ghost Faction, you're so despicable. You actually used this kind of despicable poison." Doya furiously stood up and pointed in the direction of the Ghost Faction as she cursed. "Don't say despicable, little sister from the Holy Water Sect. This is a competition. As long as you can defeat your opponent, it doesn't matter if you use poison or medicine. As long as you use the right method and defeat your opponent, you'll win. Chapter 418. Isn't my senior brother's words reasonable? A ghost faction disciple added with a sinister smile. Senior Sister Chan. Mingxia supported Chen Hanzi's body and anxiously looked up at Lu Yun and the others. Master, what do we do now? Everyone, take a look and see if you have any antidote pills on you. Antidote pills are useless. The silver wolf was poisoned by the thousand-faced venomous spider, so a simple antidote pill can't cure this kind of poison. As for Hanzi, from the looks of it, that ghost faction disciple should have given her an extremely vicious medicine that can prevent her from gathering mystic energy. How is it? How is it? I have several antidote pills here. Do you want to try swallowing them first? Daybreak Sect Master's daughter, Liang Qingqing, quickly walked up and crouched next to Chen Hanzi as she asked with concern. Master said the antidote pills are useless. Ming Xia was about to cry from anxiety. Everyone move aside. Don't crowd around. A cold voice interrupted, instantly causing everyone who was at a loss for words to have a flash of inspiration. That's right. Didn't little junior sister once treat City Lord Wu's daughter in Five Moon City? That's right, that's right. Back then, wasn't his daughter poisoned by that something heartbreak grass? Little junior sister cured the poison in a few strokes. Presumably, the poison in senior sister Chin's body this time. Xiaomu had already impatiently shooed everyone away before they could start a lively discussion. Everyone else very sensibly moved aside for her, but they basically still surrounded Chen Hanzi. After Duanyu, Situ Yi, Wei Nanfeng, and Bailey she squeezed into the crowd. They saw Mo Lian standing leisurely on the side with an empty space around her. Chen Hanzi was lying there, and Darling Qiao was squatting next to her. She first felt her pulse before turning over the dying silver wolf. She took out a small wooden box and took out a pill, stuffing it into the silver wolf's mouth. Afterwards, she focused on performing acupuncture on Chen Hanzi. As soon as she started, that inexplicably familiar feeling of performing acupuncture a million times welled up in her mind once again. That kind of medicinal powder which Chen Hanzi had inhaled was scattered all over her body, turning into small grains of powder, blocking the circulation of the profound energy in Chen Hanzi's body. Arbor's hand that was holding the needle was slightly stunned. Only then did he realize that he had unknowingly sent his profound sense into his eyes and could actually see the flow of profound energy in Chen Hanzi's body. This method of controlling the flow of mystic sense into one's eyes was one of the techniques recorded in the second layer of the Spirit Division record. She had been staying on the first level all this time, painstakingly cultivating how to use her own profound sense to control her avatar. She had only glanced at the second layer of the Spirit chapter and hadn't really studied it. However, she hadn't expected that she would be able to master it in a moment of haste. Our dear Xiaomu was a little excited in her heart. She hurriedly mobilized all the mystic energy in her branch meridians and gathered it all into mystic sense. Then, she guided it into her eyes and observed with rapt attention. More than half of the profound energy in one of Chen Hanzi's main profound veins was present. The reason why her profound energy had not filled her entire profound veins was because Chen Hanzi had exhausted quite a bit of her profound energy when she fought with Ghost Gate's Pengzhang earlier and had yet to recover. This was really strange. It really allowed her to clearly see the condition of senior sister Chen's body. This would be beneficial for her treatment. Arbor was stunned for a moment before regaining his senses and removing the small grains of powder from Chen Hanzi's body. If she could always observe other people's profound veins in the future, then wouldn't it be equivalent to having an additional cheating device in a battle? If she opened her profound eyes in the middle of a battle, wouldn't she be able to clearly see how much profound energy was left in her opponent's body? Chapter 419. However, in less than 2 minutes, her mystic conscience quietly dissipated. Not only that, her little head also felt a slight prickling sensation. Presumably, it was because she had overused her mystic conscience. Arbor didn't dare to recklessly use her mystic conscience again. Thankfully, she was fast, and in that short amount of time, the small dust in Chunhanzi's body was more or less cleaned up. Chunhanzi didn't inhale much to begin with, and in addition to her quick treatment, Chunhanzi's face turned from ghastly pale to slightly rosy pink in no time. When everyone saw that Chunhanzi's complexion had improved, they couldn't help but heave a long sigh of relief. Luyun's expression also looked better, and she asked softly, "Jojo, how's Hanzi's condition?" "It's nothing serious." Arbor stuffed a detoxification pill into Chunhanzi's mouth before standing up and saying, "Carry senior sister Hanzi over there to rest. She can't use mystic energy for 2 days, so she needs to properly nurse her body." "Okay, little junior sister." "Jojo, what's wrong?" Emolian suddenly grabbed her little hand and worriedly reached out to touch her slightly pale little face. "Is it very strenuous to perform acupuncture? I can help you." "I'm fine." Arbor hastily interrupted him and squeezed his hand hard, indicating for him to shut up. She knew what he wanted to say. He wanted to use medicine to help treat senior sister Chun. Did he think that she didn't know that there were side effects when superhumans used medicine? If the medicine was overused, it could even lead to a severe coma or something. How scary was that? It didn't take much effort for her to treat senior sister Chun and the Silver Wolf. Her complexion was only pale because she wanted to take a look at senior sister Chin's condition out of curiosity, which led to her overuse of her mystic conscious. She could recover to her original state with a little rest. It was best not to expose the crown prince's identity as an apothecary in front of others if possible to avoid trouble. Emolien's eyes curved slightly, and she chuckled softly and nodded. "Okay, I'll listen to you. What were these two talking about again?" They couldn't understand. Everyone expressed their puzzlement with stifled hearts. "Aya, little junior sister actually knows how to perform acupuncture. His medical skills seem to be pretty good." The person who spoke was Mu Liangda. It was unknown when he had approached the group, but at this moment, he was looking at Arbor with great interest, and a burst of laughter came from his mouth. "Don't you know that little junior sister wants to scold you the moment she catches you? Go further away." Everyone looked at him in disdain, but Mu Liangda was thick-skinned and didn't care at all. He continued to stand beside everyone and look at Arbor with a smile. Arbor didn't have time to care about her. She was trying to save senior sister Chin's Silver Wolf. The Silver Wolf's injuries were even more severe than senior sister Chin's. Its wounds had completely festered. The thousand-faced venomous spider's venom was very strong and corrosive. Some of the flesh around the wound was even necrotic. Arbor was using a small dagger to cut off the necrotic parts of the Silver Wolf. He quickly cleaned the wound, took out a pack of powder, sprinkled it on the cloth, and then firmly covered the Silver Wolf's wound. Soon, the Silver Wolf's wound from the venomous spider's stab stopped festering, and the bleeding also stopped immediately. At this time, Chunhanzi had already faintly regained consciousness and was calling out softly, "Silver Wolf, Silver Wolf." The senior sisters from the Holy Water sect immediately rushed to her side and bent down to whisper to her, "Don't worry, junior sister Chun. The Silver Wolf is fine." Little junior sister saved it. Only then did Chunhanzi let out a sigh of relief. Her vision darkened, and she quickly fainted again. Chapter 420. Peng Zhang sat in the Ghost Faction's seating area and watched the Holy Water sect's people busily treating the Silver Wolf from afar. A disdainful and callous smile spread across his face. A waste of effort. If the mystic abandoning powder he gave Chunhanzi could still be cured, the Silver Wolf's bite from the thousand-faced venomous spider simply couldn't be treated. Those foolish women from the Holy Water sect still wanted to vainly save the Silver Wolf's life? He was very familiar with the thousand-faced venomous spider's poison. His thousand-faced venomous spider had just advanced to level 10 not long ago, so it was simply a piece of cake for it to bite a level 9 mystic beast to death. With the Silver Wolf dead, Chunhanzi, a mystic cultivator who had lost her mystic beast, naturally had her strength greatly reduced. Putting aside the fact that she couldn't contract with other mystic beasts in the future, at least her mental state definitely wouldn't be able to overcome this hurdle, and her life would come to an end. Ha ha ha. Peng Zhang straightened his back and sent a look to junior sister Choan beside him. "Watch carefully, junior sister. Senior brother will vent your anger for you, starting with this female disciple. Choan smiled without batting an eyelid. However, her face that was buried under the gray headscarf soon scrunched up. From her position, she just happened to be able to see the youth Lien standing on the side, attentively watching a little girl who was squatting on the ground performing treatment. The youth's gaze didn't shift away from the little girl from beginning to end. This made her heart feel like it was being gnawed by thousands of ants. Not only was it riddled with holes, but it was also abnormally painful. You will regret it. Choan tugged at the corner of her mouth, revealing a cruel sneer. Peng Zhang didn't understand the situation, so he lifted his robe and crossed his legs, calmly waiting for the holy water sect's people to start wailing. However, after a long while, after 2 consecutive matches, there wasn't any movement from the holy water sect side. Instead, they all returned to their seats in their respective positions. Peng Zhang was slightly taken aback, and he looked in the direction of the holy water sect with a frown. He turned his head and said to a junior brother beside him, "Go over and inquire about what's going on with the holy water sect." The junior disciple from the ghost faction didn't dare to go over. He felt that he might be asking for a beating if he went over. Those girls from the holy water sect didn't look like they were to be trifled with. He hesitated for a moment, yet he had no choice in the end. Under the threatening gaze of senior brother Peng Zhang, he could only stand up angrily and walk over dejectedly. Their ghost sect was like this. The higher-ups bullied the lower-ups, and the elders bullied the ordinary disciples. This was a common thing. Everyone relied on their own abilities to fight for the upper echelons. Those at the bottom basically had no way out, especially junior brothers like them who had just entered the sect. In the eyes of those senior brothers who had grown up, they were just servants who could be ordered around. They had no status in the sect at all. The young disciple's heart trembled as he braced himself and walked up to a senior sister from the holy water sect. He used a voice that was only loud enough for him to hear and timidly asked, "May I ask this senior sister, how is the senior sister that you guys carried down just now? Who are you calling senior sister?" That female disciple suddenly stood up and raised her hand to slap this ghost faction disciple heavily on the face. "Scram! You bunch of little bastards from Hellgate, don't come and argue with us. Who knows you?" The junior disciple from Ghost Faction was about to cry. He covered one side of his face and turned to look at senior brother Peng Zhang, who was sitting in his own seat. He saw that half of his face was gloomy, and his expression was a bit frightening. "As senior sister, I also didn't want to come over." The junior disciple covered his face and retreated a step. Chapter 421. He was so timid that he practically didn't dare to look at the expressions of the surrounding holy water sect disciples. These holy water sect women all had extremely unsightly expressions, as if they would immediately pounce on him and tear him apart. He just knew that this was an arduous task. Senior brother Peng Zhang had sent him here purely to find trouble. "Humph, go back and tell him that if he wants to know about our senior sister Chen's situation, then tell him to come over himself. But let's see if he dares or not." "HM?" That senior sister raised her eyebrows and looked at the ghost faction disciple provocatively. Another holy water sect disciple beside her started laughing. This kind of cowardly tortoise only knows how to use some despicable methods on the stage. He doesn't even dare to run over to our territory to behave atrociously, so don't even think about it. The ghost faction disciple cast a pleading look at Peng Zhang, but the latter glared at him in dissatisfaction with a taut face. The ghost faction disciple dejectedly returned to his seat and secretly said to Peng Zhang, "Senior brother, the holy water sect wants you to personally go over and ask, are they worthy?" Peng Zhang sneered and rubbed his thumbs. "In order to hide our abilities before the competition, we instead caused junior sister to suffer grievances. Now, we don't need to anymore. These holy water sect girls will soon know that our ghost faction isn't so easy to provoke." Peng Zhang gazed darkly at Xiao Mu. Xiao Mu keenly sensed his gaze and turned her head to look at him. Her pair of eyes that were as tranquil as an ancient well contained a 10,000-year-old chill, causing Peng Zhang to inexplicably shudder. Chen Hanzi's injury was simply a fuse. Following that, Whenever the Holy Water sect disciples encountered members of the Ghost faction, they would be extremely ruthless in their attacks. Both sides had injuries of varying severity. Overall, it was still the Holy Water sect that had the upper hand. As long as the Holy Water sect disciples were wary of the Ghost faction's poisoning methods and seized the initiative, they would absolutely suppress the Ghost faction with their orthodox cultivation techniques. After several rounds, the Ghost faction disciples were all suppressed by the Holy Water sect girls and carried off the stage with heavy injuries. Ghost Surt's expression was very unsightly. At this time, Ning Bihuan defeated a Ghost faction disciple with her silver spear and even heavily injured him. The Ghost faction's elder Gue Bu Da finally couldn't help but curse, "Eldest Miss Ning, you're too heavy-handed." It was fine if the Holy Water sect's people had accumulated grievances with the Ghost faction, but even the Omni faction's Ning Bihuan, one of the 5 factions, treated the Ghost faction's people like this. Elder Ghost didn't know what to say. His old face was solemn and taut. When he looked at Ning Bihuan, there seemed to be a raging fire burning in his eyes. However, Ning Bihuan didn't care. She raised her hand to stop Elder Ghost's words. "Since we agreed on a competition, then everyone should bring out their true abilities to fight. Everyone should rely on their own abilities. If you're afraid, you can just go on stage and admit defeat. I don't care." Once he finished speaking, he shrugged in an infuriating manner, as if he looked down on Elder Ghost. Ghost Surf was angered half to death by this clumsy Ning Bihuan. He glared angrily at Peng Zhang and the others. "Why haven't you carried your junior brother down yet? How shameful. He didn't pick a good day." After these few matches, more than half of their Hellgate disciples were seriously injured. How unlucky was this? Right now, he was a bit vexed about Peng Zhang's previous willfulness. If it weren't for him starting this conflict, how could things have developed to such an unmanageable state? Chapter 422. In the afternoon, the scorching sun had already risen to its highest point, and the entire area around the stage was filled with a fiery atmosphere. This match was between a Coitus faction female disciple and a Daybreak sect male disciple. The Coitus faction female disciple threw herself into the male disciple's arms as soon as she came up, startling him into retreating repeatedly. That female disciple was still muttering, "Little big brother, don't hurt me," when the Daybreak sect disciple suddenly rushed in front of her and smashed her to the ground with a slap. The entire area was silent for a moment before bursting into cheers. Arbor speechlessly looked above the stage. The Daybreak sect disciple seemed to have been provoked, and his entire body was like a little calf as he exerted a burst of brute force. He grabbed the Coitus faction female disciple's hair with one hand and even slapped her with his other hand. In the beginning, the Coitus sect disciple was still crying out softly, "Iu, oh." Then, he was beaten until his true colors were revealed. Flustered and exasperated, he roared, "You little bastard, stop. This old lady's hair. This old lady's face. You freaking stop right there. Everyone. Come out." The Coitus faction female disciple summoned her mystic beast. She was about to go mad from anger. Her makeup, her image, her beautiful clothes, and her headdress. They were all completely ruined by this barbarian in front of her. So angry, so angry, so angry. The Coitus faction female disciple's first sentence after summoning her mystic beast was to directly order her mystic beast to eat the bull-like youth in front of her. The Daybreak sect disciple also summoned his mystic beast. Everyone couldn't help but be amused when they saw this. It really was a bull-like creature. This bull-like creature was very large, and when it stood on the stage, the two people were directly squeezed to the edge of the stage. The fat rabbit summoned by the Coitus faction disciple was simply comical and laughable in front of the bull-like creature. Therefore, everyone soon saw that the Coitus faction female disciple and her fat rabbit were completely crushed by the Daybreak sect disciple and the mystic beast bull-like creature. The fat rabbit was being trampled under the bull-like creature's hooves, and it truly looked somewhat pitiful. The Coitus faction female disciple was no longer as coquettish and flirtatious as when she first went up on stage. At this time, she was beaten into a sorry state. Her face was ashen, and her eyes were spitting fire as she angrily said, "Wait, I admit defeat." The one-sided beating finally came to an end. The female disciple of Coitus sect cried miserably and was fiercely glared at by Granny Witch. "Useless thing. You still have the face to cry?"
Master.
Tears streamed down the woman's face. She felt wronged. How could she have known that the barbarian bull would completely ignore her charm technique? Did he think that she liked to throw herself at him? That was one of the basic cultivation techniques of the Coitus faction. Unfortunately, before she could fully display her charm technique, she was viciously beaten by that little brat barbarian bull. It was too infuriating. Go back and train hard. Granny Witch's cold words caused this Coitus sect disciple to involuntarily tremble all over. Xixia Valley's Valley Master couldn't help but sigh in relief when he saw that this beating had finally ended. He continued to call out numbers with a smile on his face. Number 82, Holy Water Sect Disciple Arbor accepts the challenge. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was abruptly startled. Under everyone's puzzled gazes, he continued to recite. Ghost Faction Disciple Choan. The audience was in an uproar. Everyone was too familiar with number 82. Wasn't this the number that the Holy Water Sect's young lady changed to? Shouldn't her opponent be that Daybreak Sect disciple Muliangda? Why did she change again? Chapter 423. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was stupefied halfway through his recitation. That day, he had personally witnessed the little girl brazenly switching numbers with someone else in order to directly challenge a Daybreak Sect disciple named Muliangda on the stage. But what was happening now? Duanyu coldly glared at Muliangda. However, Muliangda merely pretended not to know why everyone was making a racket and maintained a chuckle. Muliangda, you weren't number 82 from the start, right? Duanyu coldly questioned. Everyone from Daybreak Sect looked at Muliangda himself in bewilderment. The sect master's daughter, Liang Qingqing, also frowned. Muliangda, is what senior brother Duanyu said true? The number you reported at the start was that of Choan from the Ghost Faction? Junior sister Qingqing, I'm also not sure about this matter. Muliangda continued to smile and feign ignorance. He wouldn't honestly admit that Choan had already come to him to talk about this before the small banquet. The two of them discussed and both felt that since the little girl mentioned it before, she would definitely tamper with the number drawing and change it to Muliangda's opponent no matter what. Choan wanted to give that little bitch a surprise, so she secretly instructed Muliangda that she would give him a number hint during the drawing. If the little girl really came to ask him, he would report Choan's number to the little girl. Muliangda naturally approved with both hands raised. Since he was bound to have a battle with that little girl, he was quite happy for someone to challenge the little girl before him, so that he could figure out her ins and outs. After all, he was still a bit flustered by the meaningful gazes that several people around him were giving him. If the little girl didn't have something outstanding about her, why were they all staring at him with those strange gazes? Choan truly hit it off with Muliangda when she came to find him and conspired against the little girl. Both of them obtained their own desires and achieved their goals. Xiaomu was originally exceptionally intelligent, so she naturally understood what Duanyu could figure out after thinking about it for a bit. Pretty good. Jackals of the same lair even learned to scheme against the little girl. She would let them know that in the face of strength, all schemes and tricks were nothing. Arbor stood up from his seat, and Emolian coldly looked at the Daybreak Sect disciple, Muliangda, who was secretly pleased with himself. There was still a refined and courteous smile on Muliangda's lips, but when his gaze met the Crown Prince's extremely cold and oppressive gaze, he couldn't help but quickly avert his gaze as his body inexplicably trembled slightly. Muliangda. When the little girl walked to the front of the stage, she suddenly turned around, and her eyes shot toward Daybreak Sect's seating area like lightning. She coldly said, "Since you want to see my strength first, then I'll let you see it. I hope you have the courage to accept my challenge in the next match. Don't be a coward." Ugly. Everyone was speechless. Muliangda's expression immediately turned extremely ugly, as though it had been painted green. Why was he a coward? Even his own sect's disciples were looking at him with disdain. What was going on? Duanyu sneered, "Muliangda, you're a Daybreak sect disciple. You should be very clear about the situation of the 3 sects and 5 factions. It won't do you any good to be too close to people from the Ghost faction. You understand. When Mu Liangda saw the gazes his senior and junior brothers and sisters cast over, he felt so stifled that he almost couldn't take it anymore. He and Choen were merely taking what they each needed. So why did it sound like he had betrayed the sect and colluded with the Ghost faction in Duan Yu's mouth? Chapter 424. Everyone, please don't misunderstand, Mu Liangda hastily said, Senior brother Duan Yu. I really didn't get close to the Ghost faction. Duan Yu waved his hand, not wanting to speak with him anymore. Liang Qingqing also glanced at him disappointedly. Senior brother Mu, it's wrong of you to associate yourself with the Ghost faction. Mu Liangda opened his mouth, but he was suppressing a surge of anger in his heart. He sat there sullenly as his gaze drifted towards the stage. He saw the little girl steadily walking up the stairs onto the stage. A snow leopard with white fur landed at her feet with a whoosh. Choen leaped onto the stage with a very lithe posture. It was impossible to tell that she had her hand chopped off a few days ago and was on the brink of death. Choen's gaze landed smugly on Arbor's face. What? Very surprised, right? Her voice was very hoarse, as if it had been whipped by countless vines. It was terrifyingly coarse. I'm not surprised. I just didn't expect that someone would be so stupid as to rush to court death, Arbor said dryly as he shook his head, bitch. Choen shouted roughly, her eyes glaring with a venomous glint. Have you heard of a saying? A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. Choen's right hand poked out from her sleeve, and everyone involuntarily sucked in a cold breath when they saw it. This person's right arm didn't look like a human hand at all. It was more like a piece of withered wood, and her 5 fingers and fingernails were twisted like long withered vines. Demonic cultivator! Someone suddenly shouted. Little junior sister, be careful. This person fused with the power of a demonic plant. Ha 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 ha. Choen looked up to the sky and laughed smugly. She flipped open her gray headscarf, revealing a face so fair that it was somewhat strange. Is my face beautiful? She used that hand that was twisted like a withered vine to gently caress her fair and smooth face. Is it beautiful? How should he put it? That face was quite beautiful when taken apart, but when put together, it made people feel very awkward. It was like a fake face, with a stroke here and a piece there. When put together, there was no sense of harmony at all. Arbor shook his head. Ugly. Choen's face stiffened, and she said angrily, What do you know? My previous face was 10,000 times more beautiful than this. It's all because of you. Because of you. She approached Arbor step by step, pointed at one of her eyes, and asked with a coarse smile, Can you tell that this is a fake eye? Arbor nodded. Don't be so angry. Your eyeballs might fall out. Everyone was speechless. Why was the style so strange? Choen shouted. She was simply about to go mad with anger. She originally wanted to scare the little slut, but who knew that the stoic face was expressionless from beginning to end? Shouldn't a normal girl at least be a little shocked when they saw her fake eyes? Do you know who I am? Arbor shook his head. I don't know you. You don't know me, haha. You don't know me, ha 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 ha. Choen felt that her words were extremely sarcastic. Her enemy didn't know her at all, but she was in so much pain because of this enemy in front of her day and night. How laughable was this? Choen's one eye was tearing up from laughing. Do you still remember Nian Kuei who went to Shiju City to kill you? I am his master. The master of that pitiful worm who self-destructed after you crushed his soul. Chapter 425. She didn't reveal a shocked expression like the others, nor did she point at Choen and shout, So it's you. The little fellow only tilted her head and thought for a moment before nodding and uttering an "Oh, everyone." Why did they feel like they would be angered to death if they conversed with the little girl? You finally revealed your background with surging passion and deep hatred, right? It was supposed to be very exciting and should have been a gasp of surprise. However, The other party merely threw an "oh" at you indifferently, like a basin of cold water drenching you from head to toe. All of your excited emotions abruptly disappeared. Choan trembled in anger. You don't remember Nien Kue? I feel that whether I remember one of your subordinates or not doesn't have much to do with our current battle. Arbor patted the snow leopard's head indifferently. After saying so much, can we get to the point? She felt that these people were very boring. Everyone liked to talk a lot of nonsense when they came up. With so much time to talk, the battle could have already ended. Choan looked at Arbor gloomily. You're not a level 10 mystic cultivator yet. Don't you think it's too fake to borrow someone else's mystic beast to fight? Can it be as fake as your face? You, bitch. These words simply pierced her girlish heart full of holes, making her feel like she was in hell, unable to see the light again. Arbor knitted his brows and pointed at Choan, go tear her mouth. It's so dirty. The snow leopard abruptly charged forward. Choan stretched out her 5 claws, and her withered vine-like arms swept toward the snow leopard's head with a whoosh. She shouted sternly, "You're breaking the rules too much. This snow leopard isn't yours at all. You can't let it participate in the battle. If it's not mine, then is it yours? Why don't you make it listen to you?" Arbor coldly followed up, come out." Choan's eyes shot out a cold and vicious glint. With a furious shout, a very long centipede suddenly burrowed out from her side. The most disgusting thing was that there was actually an ugly human face on the centipede's head. As it crawled, that face kept faintly facing you, and several hundred pairs of slender legs densely stretched out. Xiaomu jumped back a step. Although her small face was expressionless, her entire body was bristling. Fortunately, the snow leopard took a step forward and stood in front of her, slapping the human-faced centipede. The little fellow stomped on the ground and charged towards Choan, with the ferrule in his hand. The profound energy in his entire body surged. He was already in a state of violent rage. So, a line of fire shot out from the ferrule, directly breaking through the solid stone tiles of the arena, scraping out a shallow gully, and surging towards Choan's feet. Choan did not panic. She swung out her vine-like arm and smashed it into the incoming line of fire. A slender figure had already arrived in front of Choan. Without saying a word, a ferrule struck towards Choan's abdomen. Choan's pupils constricted. She hurriedly released her vines and wrapped them around her abdomen. Bang! Unexpectedly, the little guy changed his move very quickly and punched Choan's forehead. This punch carried a strong gust of wind as it smashed into her forehead, causing Choan to retreat several steps. Mu Liangda was watching from below, and his eyes had already revealed a grave expression. As expected, this little girl was very formidable. Her combat strength seemed to be incomparable to a level 8 mystic cultivator's cultivation. Compared to level 8 mystic cultivators of the same level, she was much stronger in terms of speed and explosive power. 10:00 clock ends. See you tomorrow. Chapter 426. Crack. The sound of her forehead cracking entered Choan's ears, causing her hair to stand on end. Bitch, bitch. Ah. Choan trembled as she reached out to touch her forehead. She felt as if something had ruptured under her skin. Back then, she was implicated by Nien Kue's self-detonation. Although she used a level 4 defensive mystic weapon at the critical moment and barely managed to save her life, she lost one eye. All the skin on her body shattered and even festered due to the explosion. Her father rushed her to the ghost sect and begged ghost physician Lu Yizhi to treat her. She was mended piece by Lu Yizhi. Her face was unnatural and uncoordinated compared to other people's normal faces. She knew better than anyone else. More than anyone else, she wanted to regain her face that originally belonged to her. But was it possible? Impossible. Because of this woman in front of her, she had already lost her face forever. But now, this woman was so cruel that she even wanted to destroy her fake face? Choan was that commandery Princess Hui, and who was doted on by everyone back then. At this moment, she was staring at the little girl standing in front of her with a sinister eye. If she hadn't coincidentally bumped into her in Xixia Valley this time, she still wouldn't have known who the commoner village girl from Shiju City that the crown prince had been protecting so well was. After her accident back then, her father felt that something was amiss. Nian Kuei couldn't have self-detonated for no reason, so perhaps someone was scheming against her behind the scenes. Her father quickly sent people out of the capital to Shiju City to investigate the whole story. However, not long after, her father secretly came to tell her that the people he sent out were all intercepted and killed by His Highness the Crown Prince. In the future, they probably couldn't send people to Shiju City to investigate anything. Otherwise, they would definitely infuriate the Crown Prince and cause unnecessary trouble. His Highness the Crown Prince was warning them not to touch that person in Shiju City again. Ha ha, ha ha ha. Commandery Princess Hui, and was laughing so hard that she nearly choked. Suddenly, a piece of dead wood shot out from under her perfectly fine chest lapel and struck Arbor's head. Arbor had been paying attention to this mentally unstable woman. When she was laughing and crying, Arbor was already on guard against her. As a result, this piece of dead wood that suddenly drilled out from under her chest didn't hurt Arbor at all. Instead, it was broken by her with a backhand slap of her ferrule. I didn't expect that my commandery Princess Hui, and of the vassal king of Nan's estate, would have such a day. Hui turned her head and looked deeply at Emolian. Your Highness, do you regret it? Emolian's slender brows were completely furrowed. However, Duan Yu suddenly jumped up from his seat and shouted, See, I told you that it was your love debt that had implicated our Jojo. Emolian turned to glare fiercely at Duan Yu, feeling extremely impatient with this commandery Princess Hui. And back then, if the vassal king of Nan hadn't sensed his intentions and immediately sent Hui out of the capital to become a disciple of the ghost sect, how could he have let this babbling woman off? What an inexplicable woman. She should have known when she started talking to herself and making a move on his Chow Chow. Karma was a circle. What was wrong with his darling taking revenge on her? Could it be that she was the only one allowed to kill people as she pleased and others weren't allowed to retaliate? Who was she pretending to be the victim for? Chapter 427. Arbor furrowed his brows. For some reason, he felt uncomfortable in his heart when he saw that masquerade woman looking at Emolian with a mournful expression. You're not allowed to look at me and act pitiful. You're not allowed to act. Arbor tilted his head and suddenly shot up, sending waves of mystic energy toward Commandery Princess Hui and below him. The current Commandery Princess Hui already struck fear into everyone's hearts. Strips of dead would actually burrowed out of her body and wriggled as if they were alive. That scene was truly too beautiful, and people could not bear to look at it directly. Master, what's going on? Are demonic cultivators such terrifying existences? Doya covered her mouth with both hands, a trace of horror on her face. Lu Yun shook her head and said, No, she shouldn't be a pure demonic cultivator. This ghost faction disciple was originally a mystic cultivator. Some people in this world can't open their mystic meridians and become a mystic cultivator, so they don't hesitate to use crooked methods to merge their bodies with evil beasts and plants to pursue the realm of a demonic cultivator. This ghost faction disciple is already a level 10 mystic cultivator, so she shouldn't be pursuing a demonic cultivator, right? Lu Yun was perplexed after much thought. Yang Shirong also nodded repeatedly on the side. Murong Sun looked at Commandery Princess Hui on the stage. At this moment, the area below her neck was completely enveloped by intertwined dead wood. It was as if she was wrapped in a cocoon made of dead wood. Other than her head being intact, every other part of her body could no longer be called a human's. Xiaomu looked down at the puppet inside the withered wooden cocoon from above. Suddenly, she recalled the ferrule in her hand into her conscious and replaced it with a normal bow and arrow. Ha 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 ha. The deadwood cocoon crazily wriggled its body, and its head strangely tilted toward the sky. When it looked at Arbor, a vicious glint flowed through its single eye. Several hundred deadwood shaved out of the cocoon and simultaneously whipped toward Arbor in midair. Whoosh, whoosh whoosh. Arbor pulled back his bowstring, constantly changing his position in the air, and with astonishing speed, He kept shooting arrows at the cocoon. The deadwood cocoon went berserk, and the thousands upon thousands of deadwood roots twisted and lashed at Xiao Mu. Floating flash. Arbor's figure instantly disappeared from the spot where he was wrapped in the dead wood. When he reappeared, he was already standing behind the deadwood cocoon. He was still continuously shooting arrows at the deadwood cocoon. He was continuously drawing out a large number of arrows from the purple storage talisman. Everyone had already lost count of how many arrows this little girl had shot. Only Emolian, Duan Yu, Bailey Shi, the three peak masters, and the sect masters saw it very clearly and calculated it very accurately. 286, 287, 288 arrows. The little girl stopped and held the bow and arrow in midair. She looked coldly at the inhuman thing that kept going crazy and whipping the arena with a withered branch. Commandery Princess Hui and had completely sunk into insanity. At this time, the little girl suddenly spoke. The human body has 409 acupuncture points. Among them, the 108 acupoints were more important. Now that you're in this ghastly state, I can't even see the acupuncture points below your neck clearly. So, just in case, I shot 288 arrows at you. That's about all the acupuncture points, right? The little girl muttered to herself, "Your arrows are useless against me." Commandery Princess Hui and roared angrily. Chapter 428. You'll know very soon whether it's useful or not. Arbor coldly gazed at her. For some reason, Mu Liangda's eyelids twitched inexplicably when he heard the little girl's words. Arbor pulled back his bowstring and aimed at the withered tree cocoon. Explosive arrow. Whoosh. That arrowhead rapidly shot toward Commandery Princess Hui, and at lightning speed. Hui and was enraged, and she abruptly swung the writhing withered tree at the arrowhead. She harshly shouted, "Whimsical bitch, do you think that a few incomparably ordinary lousy arrows can penetrate my impenetrable body? Ha 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 ha. This is the body of a level 10 mystic cultivator and a demonic cultivator. Ha ha ha." Bang! A clear and crisp sound of an explosion rang out from beneath her body. This explosion seemed to have triggered a song of explosion, and explosions of various sizes immediately resounded in Commandery Princess Hui An's body, which was like a cocoon made out of dead wood. Bang bang, bang bang bang. Crack crack. The explosive arrows directly tore open holes in the withered tree cocoon, and streaks of strange red blood flowed out. Oh, so it can bleed. Arbor nodded in realization and retreated slightly. He stood at the edge of the stage and coolly gazed at Commandery Princess Hui An, who was continuously exploding. The surroundings were already dead silent. The scene before them was truly a bit horrifying. Commandery Princess Hui An's transformation into a withered tree cocoon was already shocking enough. But now, they were directly watching a withered tree cocoon explode inch by inch in front of them. The flesh and internal organs inside all flipped out and fell to the ground piece by piece in a sea of red and white. It was quite visually stunning. Every explosive arrow would explode after hitting the target, but Arbor controlled his previous 288 arrows so that they did not explode. It wasn't until the last arrow that triggered the universe that Commandery Princess Hui An enjoyed. At the same time, it was the refreshing feeling of having such a large number of explosive arrows explode in her body. The scene was truly too beautiful. No one dared to keep staring. After a while, they could not resist looking away and shaking their heads repeatedly. The expressions of the Ghoul sect disciples became abnormally ugly. Peng Zhang was even more heartbroken. He wanted to charge into the arena like a madman. Junior sister. Junior sister. He did not expect his junior sister to do such a crazy thing in the competition. It was all because of this little witch in front of him. It was all because of her. Senior apprentice brother Peng Zhang. Senior apprentice brother Peng Zhang. You can't go. A few ghost faction disciples held him down and secretly raised their eyes to look at Elder Ghost, who had an ugly expression on his face. When Lu Yizhi was supported by his retainer, Qiu San, he stared coldly at the stage and shook his head in disappointment. Truly a useless thing. Even after swallowing the evil body pill, it was still useless. He couldn't even beat a 12 or 13-year-old girl. Cho San's eyes were filled with fear. Sir, you're right. Look at that lady from the Chow family. Her methods are so cruel and vile. She's not an easy person to deal with. Luigi's eyes turned cold. I think it's because Hui and is too weak. Such a waste of my precious evil body, Dan. What a pity. Luigi shook his head. If he had known that she was so weak, he would not have given it to her. He had found all kinds of medicinal ingredients and spent at least 2 years to refine this pill that was infused with the blood essence of the evil plant. What a pity, what a pity. Chapter 429. Sir, should I help you back? Chio-san asked quietly as he supported Luigi. Since that woman called Hui and was clearly a useless pawn, there was no need for them to continue watching. However, Luigi's eyes were still fixated on Arbor on the stage. He coughed a few times in a low voice, conjecture and confusion in his eyes. I really didn't expect that a small continent like Seikong planet in the lower star domain would have such a brilliant mystic technique. Luigi muttered to himself as he stared at the two people on the stage with a hint of hesitation in his eyes. This is nothing. In our Shuntian prefecture, there are probably plenty of low-level and mid-level mystic techniques like this, Cho-san said disdainfully. Low-level and mid-level mystic technique? Luigi sneered. Cho-san, you've been by my side for so long, but your eyesight is getting worse. Cho-san was taken aback. How brilliant can this mystic technique executed with a normal bow and arrow be? Using a normal bow and arrow to destroy the amalgamation of a level 10 mystic cultivator and a demonic cultivator is the terrifying part of this mystic technique. Luigi knew better than anyone that Hui-en's current body was completely wrapped in that withered tree cocoon. Other than the area above her neck, there were originally no openings. Chio-san, in the eyes of the Chow family's little miss, that amalgamation of demonic plants that we thought was flawless is actually full of openings. Luigi lamented. Otherwise, how could she have hit Hui-en's vitals with every arrow? How could Hui-en survive after detonating these explosive arrows? At this time, Commandery Princess Hui-en had already stepped onto the path of self-destruction. She lowered her head in horror and saw that her cocoon-like body was currently exploding inch by inch. The ground was already covered in a thick layer of withered vines and broken wood. After the outer layer of cocoon peeled off, the body inside was truly riddled with holes and was extremely horrifying. Xixia Valley's Valley Master braced himself and jumped onto the stage that was in a complete mess. He first speechlessly glanced at Arbor, who was standing at the edge of the stage, before sighing. He walked to Arbor's side and turned to the people below the stage to announce, Holy Water Sect's disciple Arbor wins this match. He turned around and glanced at the badly mutilated thing on the ground and shook his head. He thought to himself that this female disciple of the Ghost faction was probably not going to survive. After everyone heard Xixia Valley's Valley Master's announcement, they were dazed for a good few seconds. Then, as if they had regained their wits, the entire place erupted into a clamor. Mixed in were the angry roars of the Ghost faction disciples and the cheers of the Holy Water Sect disciples, so it was truly very chaotic. Arbor jumped down from the arena expressionlessly and walked straight in the direction of his own sect, ignoring the glares of the Hellgate disciples along the way. No one knew that under that stoic face of hers, there were also some small fluctuations in her mood. She had learned this explosive arrow technique from the Spirit Division Records technique chapter. To be honest, she still hadn't figured out what level of mystic technique the Spirit Division record was, but from the looks of it now, it really didn't seem that simple. Ever since it revealed its true form and flew into her consciousness on its own, she felt that this lousy book wasn't as simple as it seemed. Now that she looked at it, it was even more not simple. Any random minor technique in the technique chapter could explode Hui-en's supposedly powerful fusion body. Xiaomu suddenly paused in her footsteps and turned her head slightly to the side. Chapter 430. Right in front of her, Peng Zhang was being pressed down by several Ghost faction disciples. His face was brimming with fury, and his eyes were bloodshot as he glared at her. If it weren't for the ghost faction disciples holding him back, Peng Zhang would have already rushed over and probably wanted to beat her up. What a baffling person. His heart ached for his junior sister. Could it be that Arbor deserved to stand on the stage as a live target for his junior sister to slap? Victory or defeat depended on one's ability. So what was there to be unconvinced about? What he hated the most was this kind of person who pestered endlessly after losing. Arbor glanced at Peng Zhang before disdainfully withdrawing her gaze. She walked past the ghost faction members and briskly ran back to her sect. Suddenly, she heard everyone's gasps. The Holy Water sect senior sisters who were originally smiling at her from afar abruptly changed their expressions, and they cried out involuntarily, "Little junior sister, be careful." A gust of wind came from the back of Arbor's head, and an icy chill immediately hung on her stoic face. It turned out that Hui An was struggling with her broken body as she rushed down the stage. She snatched a sword from a ghost faction disciple's hand and threw it at her back with a vicious glint in her eyes. As expected, she was a sore loser. Since she dared to sneak attack her, she would die without a burial place, just as she was about to turn around. An extremely fast, moon-white figure landed beside her with a whoosh. The figure harshly pulled her into his embrace with his left hand, and at the same time, he raised his right hand and spread open his fingers, throwing out a leaping ball of purple flames. After the flames swept past the flying sword, that pitiful sword turned into ashes before everyone's eyes and disappeared inch by inch. Hui uncovered her fake face that had long deformed in fright. Because of her violent movements, one of her eyeballs really did fall out of its socket. The instant she covered her face with her hand, her entire body was already enveloped by a ball of purple flames. The little fellow blinked and laid in Imo Yin's embrace. A comforting, extremely faint, and relaxed aura tightly enveloped her. Everyone present simultaneously widened their eyes, and their expressions changed as they looked at the ghost faction female disciple who was struggling and screaming while being enveloped by the purple flames. Outside the arena, Lu Yiji's expression also changed for the first time as he stared in horror at the youth in white who had thrown out the purple flames. His retainer, Qiu-san, also sucked in a breath of cold air. "Sir, where did this youth come from? How could this be?" Walling, Lu Yiji shook his head and muttered to himself, "Impossible. How could one comprehend the 5 spirit origins in this kind of place? Could it be?" Qiu-san leaned close to Lu Yiji and pointed upwards. "Like us, which manner head sent them over?" "Impossible." Lu Yiji shook his head in absolute denial. "If someone from the 6 prefectures came, there's no way we wouldn't have heard of it." "That's true." Qiu-san also felt puzzled and nodded. Then could it be that this youth really comprehended the 5 spirits' origin powers on Sikong planet? Lu Yiji shook his head repeatedly. The fire spirit origin he comprehended is too powerful. I've never seen it even in Shuntian Prefecture. Impossible, impossible, impossible. This simply didn't conform to the rules and regulations. Regardless of how conflicted Lu Yiji and his retainer, Qiu-san, were in disbelief, the raging purple flames had already enveloped Commandery Princess Hui An's entire body. The little fellow turned around and coolly looked at Commandery Princess Hui An, who was howling miserably as she was roasted by the flames. Chapter 431. Sir, do you think that youth was sent down by one of the aristocratic families from the 6 prefectures to gain experience? Qiu-san still didn't believe that someone could comprehend the fire spirit's origin at such a young age in this insignificant Sikong planet in the lower star domain. If that was true, then what kind of frightening talent was that? Lu Yiji didn't say anything else and silently stared at the stage for a while before turning around and quietly leaving with his attendant Qiu-san. He could only rejoice that he had only given a demonic body pill and not a level 12 mystic breakthrough pill. Otherwise, his losses would have been even greater. Hui An wasn't of great use. At this time, Hui An's eyes were filled with fear, bewilderment, bitter tears, vexation, struggle, and disappointment. However, none of these emotions entered the Crown Prince's eyes. His gaze didn't even linger on her for half a second. Huiyan, whose face was contorted from the pain of being burned by the purple flames, wailed miserably. No, he didn't even look at her. He didn't even shift his gaze. Father, Huiyan is in so much pain. So much pain. Only then did she remember the warning her father gave her before he sent her to the gates of hell. Don't provoke that person in Shiju City again, or else even father won't be able to save you. Emolian didn't care about how bitter and regretful Commandery Princess Huiyan was. Even now, his heart was still thumping madly. When he saw that sword heading straight for the little fellow's back, Emolian felt like his heart was about to jump out of his chest. This Huiyan simply deserved to die 1,000,000 times. He even had the urge to skin her alive. Reaching out to hold the little fellow's small hand, Emolian lowered his head to examine her from head to toe. Seeing that she was unscathed, he sighed in relief. Thank goodness you're all right. Arbor looked up at him and suddenly patted his chest lightly. Her dark eyes clearly said, "Don't be afraid. What could happen to this darling?" Emolian suddenly hugged her tightly, chuckling softly as he hugged her. His darling was so funny. Xiaomu tried her best to raise her head in his arms and stretch out her small paws to push him away. However, for some reason, his aggrieved voice from back then kept echoing in her mind. Don't push me away. Don't push me away. Arbor withdrew his claws somewhat sullenly, thinking to himself, maybe what happened just now really scared him a little. Men are really too easily frightened. Arbor lifted his chin helplessly, put his little hand behind his back, and patted him gently. Morong Sun immediately jumped up, but before she could angrily yell, "Damn punk! Let go of my disciple," Shisha Valley's Valley Master, this good-natured person, jumped out first and shouted, "Next match! Holy Water Sect disciple Su Shanshan accepts the challenge of Daybreak Sect disciple Yang Qingqing." The crowd's gazes that were on Emolian and Yi Zichen immediately shifted back to the arena. However, the shock in his heart towards the youth could not be calmed down for a long time. Only a small cluster of purple flames was left. It fell to the ground and slowly burned. As for Huiyan, she had already been burned to ashes at some point in time. Far away in Guanlan City, the old prince of the vassal king of Nan's estate suddenly received a report from the people guarding the ancestral hall. He hastily rushed to the ancestral hall and collapsed on the ground when he saw his daughter's eternal life lamp extinguished. Huiyan, she died. She didn't even leave behind a word before she died. Oh, his daughter. The old prince was overcome with grief. Princess Anam rushed over and burst into tears the moment she entered the room. Chapter 432. Your Highness, what exactly is going on? Tell me what happened. Tell me. Princess Anam felt like her heart was about to shatter. She only had a son and a daughter. Her eldest son was away most of the time, while her daughter was a caretaker. Several years ago, an inexplicable self-explosion destroyed her daughter. She had asked her husband countless times what happened, but he refused to tell her. After that, her daughter was sent to the ghost sect for treatment. She originally thought that her daughter would come back this year no matter what. Who would have expected that after waiting for so long, she would end up seeing her daughter die before her own? Princess Anam was infuriated, and she pulled the old prince to continuously interrogate him about the matter. The old prince remained silent from beginning to end, causing Princess Anam to be so anxious that she paced around him in circles. Say something. My daughter died tragically, but as her mother, I don't even have the right to know. The vassal king of Nan looked at the princess consort and sighed deeply. I will send people to investigate this matter. Is it related to that self-explosion several years ago? The princess consort was unable to restrain her anger. You still won't tell me why that person self-exploded. Tell me, did someone deliberately frame my Huiyan? Princess consort, it's not that I don't want to tell you. You won't benefit from knowing this matter. The vassal king of Nan understood his princess consort too well. She was used to making her own decisions and couldn't tolerate a grain of sand in her eyes. She was already so strict with those concubines and concubines' daughters who didn't pose any threat in the inner court, let alone if she knew that the self-explosion back then was entirely due to someone else's revenge after Hui An's willful and reckless behavior. She had doted on Hui An since she was young, so she wouldn't find fault with herself when something happened and would definitely blame it all on the other party. If she knew that the crown prince also had a hand in the back, with the princess consort's personality, she definitely wouldn't take things lying down. He understood His Highness too well. He usually looked gentle and cheerful and didn't seem to get angry, but once he wanted to deal with you, it definitely wouldn't be as simple as killing you. He would definitely dig deeper and uproot you. Several years ago, it was he who made a prompt decision to withdraw quickly and immediately send Hui An out of the capital. Otherwise, Hui An would probably have died back then. My Wu family is not to be trifled with in Guanlan City. What are you worried about, Your Highness? Tell me. The princess consort questioned angrily. Recently, the Duan family has been choosing noble ladies for the second son of the third branch. If you have time, bring a few more maidservants to visit the Duan family. The old prince straightened out his mood, stood up, and left after saying this. King Consort Wu Honghua coldly watched as the vassal king of Nan walked out. She gnashed her teeth and said, "Do you think I won't be able to find anything if you don't say anything? Huiyan, don't worry. Mother will definitely avenge you. Whoever dares to touch you, Mother will turn their entire family into ashes." Eternally lost. Maijiu's section break. After 1.5 days of competition, the top 20 were decided. Disciples from the 3 sects and 5 groups were selected. However, among them, the Ghost sect suffered the most. Among the 3 sects, the Holy Water sect and the Heavenly Tao sect had 4 disciples each. The Daybreak sect had 3, the Purple Firmament faction had 4, and the Omni faction and Myriad faction had 2 each. Only the Ghost sect was the most pitiful, with only Peng Zhang being selected. Moreover, during the competition, Peng Zhang's level 10 Mystic Beast, the thousand-faced venomous spider, had bitten many people from the other sects, causing Arbor to be very busy with detoxification. How infuriating! It caused her to have to save people while watching the competition. Peng Zhang had made countless enemies now, and even the other members of the 5 groups hated him to the core. Chapter 433. The first match of the top 20 was between Daybreak sects Duan Yu and Ghost faction's Peng Zhang. Elder Ghost was a bit nervous. Their sect only had 1 person who entered the top 20. If they were eliminated this time, then they really would have no face left. If they couldn't even enter the top 10, how could they face the sect master when they returned? They would most likely be hacked to death by the sect master. Peng Zhang, you have to do well. Elder Ghost silently cheered for Peng Zhang in his mind. Peng Zhang coldly looked at the youth who was slowly walking up the stage with his arms folded. The youth was wearing a brocade robe and long shoes. He held a raven bone fan in his hand, and his face was as handsome as jade. Duan Yu was wielding a weapon. This was her first time seeing a youth wielding a weapon. Arbor's eyes brightened slightly. This was definitely the rhythm of beating Peng Zhang to death. Not bad. Not bad, darling Xiao liked it. This Peng Zhang should have died long ago. He bounced around endlessly and made her so busy. Peng Zhang released the thousand-faced venomous spider. As soon as it was released, the thousand-faced venomous spider excitedly crawled around his feet, hissing as it brewed its venom. "Summon your mystic beast," Peng Zhang said haughtily. Duan Yu sneered. "Do I need to summon my mystic beast to deal with you guys? Don't joke around." He didn't say anything else and flung the raven bone fan out. The raven bone fan abruptly flew in front of Peng Zhang, but it was blocked by the mystic energy Peng Zhang channeled, unable to advance even half an inch. Peng Zhang sneered and was about to mock when his pupils abruptly contracted. Countless specks of cold light flew out from the raven bone fan and whizzed towards Peng Zhang's surroundings before exploding in succession. Peng Zhang's expression abruptly changed. He mustered all the mystic energy in his body to launch a full-scale defense, but how could he make it in time? How could he have known that this punk would use a killing move as soon as he started? He didn't give the other party any time to prepare. This was not an ordinary concealed weapon. When the cold light exploded on his body, He could clearly feel that every bit of the cold light that flew out from the black bone fan contained a strong, profound energy. The mystic energy he used to defend himself was completely unable to block the specks of cold light flying out of the raven bone fan. Peng Zhang could feel that the defensive power around his body was weakening, and he could only activate his profound energy in a fluster to protect his body. He even shouted angrily, "Thousand-faced venomous spider!" Hiss. The thousand-faced venomous spider swiftly crawled towards Duan Yu's leg. In the blink of an eye, the raven bone fan flew back into Duan Yu's hand. Duan Yu leaped, and his slender figure streaked across the air like a shadow. His long, loose hair suddenly swayed slightly. Hundreds of cold lights suddenly shot out from his hair and pounced on the thousand-faced venomous spider on the ground. Whoa! Everyone watched nervously, and many people couldn't help but stand up. Elder Ghost's face was even more ashen. His fingers that were pinching the armrest had already turned slightly purple. "You've done well. Peng Zhang, you're the only one left in the sect." After Duan Yu closed the raven bone fan in his hand, he flicked it slightly with his raised wrist. The black bone fan abruptly transformed into a long sword. Following the youth's figure, it was suddenly delivered to Peng Zhang's throat. The blazing sun was like fire, the sunlight shining down. At that moment, everyone felt as if the youth's figure that was suspended in midair had become transparent. The long sword slashed open Peng Zhang's neck. Peng Zhang turned pale with fright as his eyes bulged. He only heard cracking sounds coming from his throat, as if something warm was slowly flowing out. Bam! Peng Zhang powerlessly crashed to the ground. Dejected, Elder Ghost drooped his head down, laying down on the stool in defeat. Chapter 434. The youth gracefully landed on the ground and withdrew his long sword, turning it into a fan again as he gently waved it. Needless to say, this handsomeness not only made the Coitus sect's love-struck infatuated, but even their own Daybreak sect's female disciples clasped their faces and called him senior martial brother. When Shisha Valley's Valley Master rushed up, Peng Zhang had already breathed his last. His venomous spider was still hanging on by a thread after being attacked by 100 cold glints, but it immediately died the moment its master died. With one man and one beast's corpses strewn across the stage, the Valley Master didn't know what to say anymore. Say that the youth was too ruthless and killed his opponent in a few moves? But he didn't even summon out his mystic beast. He clearly went easy on him. In the end, it was still because Peng Zhang was too weak. Duan Yu was careless and killed him. In a moment of carelessness, Shisha Valley's Valley Master comforted himself like this, but even he couldn't continue making up this lie. After Shisha Valley's Valley Master announced the results of the match, Duan Yu jumped down from the stage and excitedly ran toward Arbor. "Jojo, I killed that bad guy. Are you happy?" Duan Yu's question caused the Ghost Faction disciples' faces to darken. "Happy," Arbor replied bluntly. "Humph." Emolian rolled her eyes at him. "I'll do it in one move." "Bah." Duan Yu simply moved a small square stool and squeezed himself next to Arbor. "Jojo, what grudge do you have with Muliangda? Tell me about it." Everyone pricked up their ears. After 2 more matches, it would be Arbor's match against Muliangda. Everyone felt that it would definitely be worth watching. Of course, they were also very curious as to why this little junior sister of the Holy Water sect kept wanting to challenge Muliangda Wong. Arbor tilted his head and pondered. Enemy. The little fellow suddenly thought of something and left her seat to run to Daybreak Sect's Sect Master Liang Wanshan. She cupped her hands respectfully. "Sect Master, I'm going to kill your sect's disciple, Muliangda, in a moment. It has nothing to do with our sections. This is a personal grudge between me and him. Please forgive me if I'm overboard." The stifled Sect Master Liang, the Heavenly Dao Sect's Sect Master, Situ Min, laughed. "Sect Master Liang, this little fellow came to greet you." Morong Sun also found her disciple unbearably adorable. When she received Liang Wanshan's speechless gaze, she broke into laughter and said, "I really don't know why. However, this disciple of mine has always said whatever she wants to say." If she says that she has a grudge against your virtue, then that's it. Since it's a personal grudge, this sect master shouldn't interfere too much. Liang Wanshan was also speechless. It's just that Mu Liangda isn't as ordinary as you think. Liang Wanshan said hesitantly, you might not be able to defeat him. Sect Master Liang, don't worry. I'll definitely kill him. The little fellow swore and ran off. Liang Wanshan had a stifled look on his face. Why am I getting more and more worried? Everyone burst into laughter. Why did it sound like Sect Master Liang was going to kill Mu Liangda in the end, and even told the Sect Master not to worry? It was too comical. Arbor ran back to Emolian's side and told Duan Yu after sitting down, I just greeted your Sect Master. I said that I'll kill Mu Liangda in a moment, and he agreed. Everyone looked at her like she was a little oddball, and simply didn't know what to say. Duan Yu immediately lost his integrity and encouraged, Jojo, do your best. You can do it. Emolian. Young man. Where's your integrity? You're too shameless. Chapter 435. For the next 2 matches, they stopped after a certain point and were relatively harmonious. Xue Xiao and Bailey Shi fought, and Bailey Shi won. Wei Nanfeng and a Purple Firmament faction disciple fought, and Wei Nanfeng won. The 4th match was Arbor and Mu Liangda's match. The two were silent the entire time as they ascended the stage. They looked at each other and didn't speak for a long time. I heard that you're also a talisman practitioner. Let me experience it. It was rare for Arbor to be in the mood to speak before the battle. Mu Liangda's face was gentle as he courteously bowed to Arbor. Little junior sister, you should make the first move. You can summon that snow leopard of yours first. Just use the talismans when I tell you to. You like to talk so much nonsense. If you won't use it, I'll use it. Arbor swung her hand, and a row of talismans flew out and suddenly leaped in front of Mu Liangda. Mu Liangda's eyes abruptly constricted. He raised his dumbfounded face and foolishly looked at the little girl who suddenly made a move. What was going on? Mu Liangda was truly dumbfounded. Ever since he left Guanlan City's main residence, he really hadn't seen anyone who could throw out so many talismans in one go in all these years. His first thought was, is it fake? However, that row of talismans all gathered around him and abruptly tightened. Binding Talisman Matrix. Our dear Xiaomu had long planned out how to deal with this Mu Liangda. Wasn't this person a talisman practitioner? Then she would use talisman matrices to deal with him and let him die a worthy death. However, she seemed to have overestimated this Mu Liangda. Staring at Mu Liangda, who was flustered in the binding talisman matrix and continuously using his shoulder and elbow to strike left and right, Arbor's eyes narrowed in displeasure. She asked in an extremely dissatisfied tone, are you really a talisman practitioner? Why can't you even crack such a simple binding talisman matrix? This kind of binding talisman matrix was one of the more basic types of talisman matrices, and it only used beginner talismans. Even so, she could make Mu Liangda, a talisman practitioner, into such a sorry state? Arbor couldn't help but suspect that the person in front of her might just be a fake. Mu Liangda's expression truly changed. Binding Talisman Matrix? This was actually the Binding Talisman Matrix that Patriarch once sighed and yearned for? Why did this girl know how to use talisman matrices? What's going on? None of the talisman patrician families in Guanlan City knew how to use the talisman array. How could this young lady use it? Mu Liangda couldn't believe his eyes. Moreover, from the girl's tone, it seemed that this binding glyph array was only the most basic glyph array to her. Who was she? Hurry up and use your talisman. Arbor glared at him unhappily. You don't have to go easy on me. Which eye of yours saw me going easy on you? Thus, a hilarious scene appeared on the stage. The little girl stood at the side of the stage and glared at Mu Liangda, who was trapped in the binding talisman array. What are you doing? Come out. Mu Liangda was speechless. Under the little fellow's repeated urging, he couldn't help but say angrily, little girl, don't go overboard in everything you do. Even if our patriarch were to come, he might not be able to immediately decipher this talisman formation of yours. What's more, it's just me. Xiaomu creased her brows, truly dissatisfied to the extreme in her heart. She had originally thought that if this guy was a talisman expert, she wouldn't kill him first. She would first exchange a few pointers with him, then kill him. Hearing him say this, she felt uncomfortable all over, and the fury in her heart surged. You big liar. Go to hell. Countless talismans flew out with a whoosh. He even said that he was a talisman practitioner? This stinky, shameless liar. Just looking at him made her angry. How dare he lie to her? What a waste of time. Everyone. Chapter 436. Liar. She really wanted to kill him. However, she also really wanted to test the power of other talisman masters. She had never competed with other talisman masters in all her years of drawing talismans. It felt so novel, and she really wanted to give it a try. Countless talismans flew out from under her sleeves and floated in front of the stupefied Mu Liangda. Fuck. What the hell was this? Where did this girl get so many talismans? Mu Liangda's eyes were dazed, and his mind was in a mess. These talismans floating in front of him were engraved with runes that he could not understand at all? No, he could understand a few of them. He understood the beginner-level speed talisman, the beginner-level strength talisman, and the beginner-level safety talisman. However, he actually could not understand a single one of the mysterious runes on the remaining 200 or so talismans. Heavens, although he was only from a side branch of the talisman patrician family, he had studied in the main family for a period of time after all, so he knew the general standard of talisman masters. Although there was no lack of people who were more talented and intelligent than him, he was definitely not the worst. But now, he felt that the talismans he drew were just a pile of shit in front of the little girl's talismans. The onlookers were simply speechless. Why was this scene so funny? What happened to the promised fierce battle? Why did they only see a circle of floating talismans surrounding Mu Liangda? The latter was like a clown, bumping around in this circle of talismans, but no matter what he did, he was unable to shake off that circle of talismans. The funniest thing was that the little fellow was actually anxious outside the circle of talismans and repeatedly urged others to quickly come out. You didn't throw this talisman array at others? You're anxious now? The onlookers were speechless. They asked themselves honestly, if any of them were in Mu Liangda's position, they would definitely not feel good and would definitely be driven crazy. Take out your talismans, hurry up. The little girl pulled a long face as she impatiently glared at Mu Liangda, who was trapped in the binding talisman array. You! Mu Liangda was about to go crazy from anger. Was this girl born to piss people off? Now that he was trapped in this talisman array, there was nothing he could do. Even if he took out talismans, he couldn't throw them out of this talisman array. He was completely bound in this area. Mu Liangda felt that this girl was doing it on purpose. She said that on purpose to trample on his pride and dignity. Arbor's black eyes widened. He was so angry that he wanted to stomp his feet. Was this person an idiot? Why did it feel like that idiot was speaking to him in a completely different world? She had already asked him to take out his talisman, so why didn't he do so? She really wanted to see what other talisman masters were like. She urgently wanted to know what level she, as an intermediate level symbol master, was at among the symbol masters. She was so angry that Mu Liangda, this stupid fellow, couldn't even fulfill such a small wish for her. A Violet Firmament faction disciple who was closest to the arena kindly reminded her, little junior sister, I think that Mu Liangda probably can't walk out of the talisman array you set up. If you want him to come out, then remove the talisman array. The battle between the two of them made the onlookers anxious. You're so stupid. How can you not even crack such a basic binding talisman array? You're definitely not a talisman master. You big liar. You fooled everyone in Daybreak Sect. Our dear Xiaomu angrily said. Chapter 437. Arbor's words immediately enraged Mu Liangda, so much that his lungs were about to explode. How was he not a talisman practitioner? He was an orthodox talisman practitioner, all right? He came from a prestigious family. What kind of joke was this? Mu Liangda furiously took out 7 to 8 talismans from his inner world and flung them one by one at Arbor. I'm a talisman practitioner. I'm a talisman practitioner from Guanlan City's Mu family. What would a little girl like you know? Arbor scooped up those yellow talismans and carefully examined them one by one. She was so angry that she threw them all to the ground and stomped on them indignantly. You liar. I knew how to draw these lousy beginner-level talismans when I was 7 years old. You still want to lie to me? You clearly stole these beginner-level talismans from who knows where, and you still dare to say that you drew them yourself. Shameless. Mu Liangda widened his eyes. However, the onlookers only felt that this scene was extremely exciting. From little junior sister's words, they completely understood one thing. She knew how to draw talismans when she was only 7 years old and was still a baby. Of course, Mu Liangda also understood. He stuttered in shock. You? Who is your master? Arbor looked at Mu Liangda with disappointment. Her wish to spar with a talisman practitioner was completely dashed. Fortunately, she actively accepted the challenge last night and even drew 200 different talismans. What use was that? She had already completely lost the mood to talk now. Emolian was all too familiar with this expression of hers. With one look, she knew that the little fellow wouldn't be able to talk anymore. Sure enough, she suddenly released her small hand and threw a little chick into the air. At the same time, she summoned a feral from her conscious and swung it straight at Mu Liangda without another word. The 60 binding talismans moved again and circled around Mu Liangda with a whoosh. Greatly alarmed, Mu Liangda hurriedly dodged and shouted, "Mystic beast, come out!" Shriek. The shrill shriek came from midair, and the large cyan blue bird swooped down and spat out a large cloud of icy mist. In a single exchange, it froze the mystic beast that Mu Liangda had just summoned into a layer of frost. Then, it lightly waved its sharp claws. With a soft, peewed sound, the Xin beast that was sealed in the snow was immediately smashed into pieces by the Qing Luan's claw and fell to the ground. This time, everyone was really shocked. Wei Nanfeng rolled and jumped up from the stool, his eyes staring straight as he subconsciously waved the distinguished scholar fan in his hand, muttering incessantly, "Savage! Savage! What kind of Xin beast was this? This little girl is too scary." "Amazing! Amazing!" Princess Mi, who was at the side, slapped her thigh and cheered. "This is what a hot-blooded battle is like." Ha ha ha. Mu Liangda's expression completely changed. He suddenly felt a terrifying aura of death approaching. The binding glyph array once again encircled his body. At the same time, the little girl had already raised her fist and rushed in front of him. Boom! A fist wrapped in dense, profound energy directly bombarded Mu Liangda's body. Mu Liangda blocked with a backhand, but due to the binding glyph array, most of his profound energy was restrained and unable to be used. As a result, he didn't even receive the little girl's first punch and directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Like a kite with a broken string, he flew out backwards. The little fellow chased after him and swung her fist again. Another fist wrapped in profound energy. This time, it directly hammered a large hole in the arena, trapping Mu Liangda inside. Chapter 438. Immediately after a series of explosions, everyone stared dumbfoundedly at the new hole in the stage. But Mu Liangda had already disappeared. From the looks of it, he should have completely fallen into that hole. The little girl expressionlessly stood at the edge of the hole and stared at Xixia Valley's Valley Master, who had flown onto the stage, for a while. Xixia Valley's Valley Master speechlessly stared at her for a long time before ordering 2 disciples to go forward and carry Mu Liangda out of the hole. The onlookers couldn't help but be stupefied when they took a closer look. How could Mu Liangda's former graceful and exuberant face be seen? His entire face was even fatter than a pig's head, and his entire body was covered in blood. Yu. Mu Liangda was hanging on by a thread as he glared at Arbor with his eyes that had swollen into slits. He couldn't spit out another word for a long time. Mu Liangda, do you still remember Qiao Zhongbong, who entered Daybreak Sect at the same time as you? Arbor asked in a clear and cold voice as she stood with her hands behind her back. Xiao Zhongbong? Xiao Zhongbong? He didn't know how many years it had been since someone had mentioned this name to him. That youth who came from the countryside, that youth who was quite talented and was quite well liked by his master back then. His age was about the same as his, so he should be in his 30s now. This little girl was called Arbor? Realization suddenly dawned on Mu Liangda, and he struggled to raise his head from the stretcher. His deformed face was slightly contorted as he strenuously enunciated each word. You're Qiao Zhongbong's daughter? That's right. Arbor nodded and looked at him solemnly. Back then, you saw that my father's talent was better than yours, so you were afraid that he would steal your limelight in front of Wei Cheng. Thus, you secretly poisoned him and damaged his mystic meridians, causing him to be driven out by Wei Cheng. I am Qiao Zhongbong's daughter. I came to avenge my father. Do you have any objections? Everyone. Could he say anything if he had any objections? Could he beg for mercy if he had any objections? The little girl didn't wait for Mu Liangda to continue speaking and continued. Since you don't have any objections, you can go on your way with peace of mind. Wait. Mu Liangda narrowed his swollen eyes and coughed. You dare to kill me? I am a member of Guanlan City's Mu clan. My clan's background is so powerful. How dare you? Before Mu Liangda could finish his nonsense, the little girl waved her small hand and directly threw a handful of colorless and odorless powder at him. What happened afterwards really was only a fleeting moment. It was so fast that even Xixia Valley's Valley Master, who was standing beside Mu Liangda, couldn't react in time. Mu Liangda, who was half sitting on the stretcher, rolled off the stretcher in pain. He covered his face with both hands and howled incessantly. After rolling on the arena for a while, his voice completely disappeared, and his entire person lay upright on the arena. Arbor's small face was stoic as he looked at Mu Liangda and shook his head in disappointment. I thought that you would at least be able to resist for a moment because of your research on poisons. Yet, unexpectedly, he couldn't even resist for 2 minutes. He reckoned that he had also brought that bag of vicious medicinal powder from his home back then. Did he think that he could be so awesome just because he had a powerful clan background? Wasn't he just a weakling at the mercy of others? Xixia Valley's Valley Master glared at the little girl in front of him and was tongue-tied for a long time. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Little girl, the results of the competition were already out just now. You shouldn't have poisoned him and poisoned him to death." Arbor blinked. Didn't he die from his severe injuries? Chapter 439. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was simply infuriated by this child and glared at her back for a while before ordering people to carry Mu Liangda away. It was just that the deep hole in the arena could not be repaired right away. After the top 10 competition's name list was released, each of the 3 sects had 2 disciples qualified. Just based on the number of people, it was a complete victory. Ghost Faction and Myriad Faction's disciples were eliminated. Only Purple Firmament Faction had 2 people qualified, while Coitus Faction and Omni Faction each had 1 person qualified. They were Coitus Faction's Qi Mei and Omni Faction's Ning Bihuan. Unfortunately, the next match was Omni Faction's Ning Bihuan versus Coitus Faction's Qi Mei. After Ning Bihuan ascended the stage, she hugged her silver spear and stood there with a dark expression. Although her face was not much different from her younger sister, Ning Baifin's, it was much gloomier than Ning Baifin's. She looked like someone owed her several million yuan all day long. Fortunately, she did not talk much and was not as annoying as her younger sister. After the little girl poisoned Mu Liangda to death, she was in a good mood and sat there listening to her senior sister's gossip. They were talking about Coitus Faction's Granny Witch. I asked around. The reason Granny Witch hated Eldest Ant Master so much was because her face was disfigured by Eldest Ant Master back then. Chang Yushi was like an information broker, showing off the first-hand information she just obtained. Where did you ask around? As Morong Sun's eldest disciple, Su Shanshan did not know her master had such a story. Shuexiao couldn't resist laughing. Where else could she ask around? Second Ant Master most likely told her. Chang Yushi rubbed her hands and giggled mischievously. Then do you want to hear it? Tell us, tell us, tell us quickly. The senior sisters hastily urged Changyushi not to keep them in suspense when they heard such an interesting story. At this time, a purple talisman floated in front of the little girl's eyes. She took out several cans of snacks and fruit in succession and distributed them to the senior sisters. The senior sisters couldn't help but be amused. Oh my, look at their little junior sister. She took out food as soon as she heard a story. Although she didn't say it, she was definitely 120% curious about their master's story. When the disciples from the other two sects who were close to each other saw the little fellow handing out food, they also came over to divide it up. It was supposed to be a martial arts competition, but they made it seem like a gathering of the masses. Let me tell you, didn't Granny Witch from the Joyous sect capture many beautiful men as vessels back then? As he said this, his finger continuously pointed at Situ E, Weinan Feng, Duan Yu, and the others who had come forward. People like this, and this, they're definitely targets for Granny Witch to capture. The handsome men all had innocent looks on their faces. The demonic art she practices is to absorb people's yang energy. The little girl silently took a bite of the apple and raised her head to look at Changyushi, who was getting more and more ridiculous with her words. She silently turned her head away. Emolian couldn't help but laugh as she glanced at her. She raised her hand to remove a small piece of fruit peel from the corner of her lips. Aya, in short, she's using people as vessels to refine that thing in other people's bodies, such as profound energy and profound energy, to increase her own profound energy. It's said that it can even preserve her youth and beauty. Changyushi finally hit the nail on the head and vividly described, that night, it was a dark and windy night. Granny Witch captured several beautiful men and was at the critical juncture of absorbing their mystic energy. Eldest Ant Master suddenly broke through the window and entered. Puffed. Chapter 440. Just hearing Changyushi's description was quite comical, so it could be imagined how delightful that scene was back then. After Eldest Ant Master broke the window and entered, she yelled, "I'm about to die." How did you know that Eldest Ant Master yelled, "I'm about to die"? Right. How did you know? Everyone asked curiously. Second Ant Master must have made it up. Shueshao pursed her lips and said with a smile, "How is that making it up?" Changyushi glared at her. Eldest Ant Master yelled, "I'm about to die," and then rushed up. She lifted Granny Witch, who was at the critical juncture of her cultivation, and gave her a violent beating. And then? Everyone's eyes turned round as they questioned her curiously. What else is there? Apparently, Eldest Ant Master broke Granny Witch's cultivation on the spot. Her fair, tender, and juicy face turned into her current appearance in minutes. Chicken skin and crane hair. TSK. She's very different from her past self. Changyushi spoke too loudly. So much so that Granny Witch and the rest all heard her, and they shot stern gazes in their direction. The Holy Water Sect's senior and junior sisters stuck out their tongues in laughter. They all pretended not to see the coitus faction's man-eating expression and averted their gazes. Everyone lowered their voices and continued to laugh and chat for a while. They all thought that it was no wonder Granny Witch looked like she wanted to eat someone when she saw Eldest Ant Master. It turned out that there was such a thing going on. At this time, after everyone finished gossiping, they finally discovered that Ning Bihuan had been standing alone on the stage for quite a while. At this time, Ning Bihuan hugged her silver spear and asked impatiently, "Is that coitus faction's Chi Mei coming to compete or not? If she doesn't want to compete, then treat it as a forfeit and directly announce the results." However, Granny Witch's expression was very unsightly. Her expression was already unsightly enough when everyone in the Holy Water sect knew about her gossip just now. At this time, Mayor only went to relieve herself, but she was even more displeased that she still hadn't returned. After a while, when Ning Bihuan was already so impatient that she wanted Xixia Valley's Valley Master to announce the results again, a figure wrapped in a black cloak suddenly jumped onto the stage. At first glance, Granny Witch discovered that the person under the cloak wasn't her disciple Chi Mei. She stood up at once and berated with a slightly grave expression, Who are you? You're not Mayor. What did you do to Mayor? The people from the other sects were naturally not familiar with Chi Mayor. When they heard what Granny Witch said, they could not help but feel a little strange. Why were there still people rushing to replace Chi Mayor in the arena to fight Ning Bihuan? Ning Bihuan wasn't an easy bone to chew on. However, the person on stage didn't say much and directly sent out a wave of profound energy towards Ning Bihuan. Ning Bihuan raised her eyebrows. She raised her silver spear and charged forward. The two of them exchanged dozens of blows. Ning Bihuan curled her lips and coldly said, "Who the hell are you? You're not a disciple of Koida's sect, are you?" The person who came did not make a sound. However, Murong Sun had already recognized the person at this time. Her face instantly darkened, and her complexion was quite unsightly. Yang Shirong looked at her expression and asked curiously, "What's wrong, senior sister?" "It was Ling Min," Murong Sun said coldly. "What?" The two peak masters couldn't help but feel slightly surprised. They all knew that Murong Sun did not bring Ling Min with her on this trip, so her sudden appearance meant that she escaped from Sky Peak's Duantian Cliff. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.